The holding chamber stank of fear and disinfectant. Lyra pressed her back against the cold metal wall, her crystalline skin flickering with the pale blue luminescence that marked her species as Veltran, a race the Dominion had nearly wiped from existence 3 generations ago. Through the narrow viewport, she could see the grand arena where the bonding ceremony would take place, its obsidian floors polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the 1,000 torches that burned with violet flame. Around its perimeter, she was the last of her family, the last of her world's royal line, though that meant nothing now. The Dominion cared nothing for fallen dynasties. To them, she was simply property, a rare specimen to be bonded to one of their decorated warriors as a trophy, a living symbol of conquest. The door hissed open. 2 Dominion guards entered, their segmented armor gleaming like beetle shells, their forearms carrying shock staffs that hummed with lethal energy. Behind them strode Overseer Krell, a towering figure whose species had served the Dominion for millennia. His triangular head swiveled toward her, compound eyes glittering with cold efficiency. "Subject Lyra 7, he announced in the clicking multitonal language of the Dominion. "You have been selected for bonding with Commander Vexthor of the Crimson Fleet. This is a great honor. You will comply with the ritual protocols." Lyra's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Please, I don't want this. The bonding, it's not meant to be forced. My people's bonds were sacred, chosen freely." "Your people are extinct," Krell interrupted, his tone devoid of emotion. "What they believed is irrelevant. The Dominion's bonding rituals are what matter now. You will submit or you will be terminated, and another specimen will take your place. The Dominion has 3 other Veltran in stasis. Your uniqueness is finite." Her legs trembled as the guards gripped her arms. Their touch burned cold through the thin ceremonial robe they'd forced her into, white fabric that left her shoulders and arms bare, exposing the intricate patterns of light that moved beneath her translucent skin. Among her people, such patterns told stories, conveyed emotions. Now they simply broadcast her terror in pulses of erratic blue. They dragged her through corridors lined with viewing galleries, where Dominion nobility watched from behind force fields, their various forms strange and terrible. Some had too many limbs, others too many eyes. All wore expressions of aristocratic boredom, as if witnessing the subjugation of a sentient being was mere entertainment between courses at a feast. The arena opened before her like a mouth. The crowd roared, thousands of voices in hundreds of languages, unified in their anticipation of the spectacle. At the center of the obsidian floor stood Commander Vexthor, resplendent in crimson battle armor, adorned with the skulls of enemies he'd personally slain. His species was humanoid in general shape, but covered in scales that shifted between red and black, and his eyes glowed with an inner fire that spoke of genetic enhancements and combat drugs. "Behold!" The arena's announcement system boomed in galactic common. "The honored Commander Vexthor claims his prize, a Veltran, last remnants of the shattered worlds. Let the bonding commence." They shoved Lyra forward. She stumbled, catching herself on hands and knees, her palms pressed against the cold stone. Vexithor approached with slow, deliberate steps, savoring the moment. When he spoke, his voice was a low growl that carried across the arena. "You will kneel properly," he commanded. "You will present your neck for the collar. You will speak the words of submission in your native tongue so that all may know your people's defeat is complete." Lyra looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, her light patterns now a chaotic storm of distress. "Please," she whispered, "please don't do this. The bonding isn't meant to be like this. It should be a choice, a connection between equals." Vexthor's laugh was harsh. "Equals? You are Veltran. We are Dominion. There is no equality here, only power and its absence." He raised his hand, and a servant scurried forward carrying a collar of dark metal inscribed with binding runes. "This collar will link your life force to mine. You will feel what I command you to feel. You will want what I will you to want. Your very thoughts will bend to serve me." The crowd cheered. Lyra's vision blurred. She could feel the weight of history crushing down on her, the accumulated grief of her extinct people, the hopelessness of her situation. The collar gleamed in the torchlight, a circle of enslavement that would sever the last thread of her free will. But before Vexithor could place it around her neck, a sound pierced the arena's roar, a ship's engine. Not the smooth, nearly silent engines of Dominion vessels, but the rough, coughing growl of something older, something barely holding together. The crowd's noise faltered as heads turned upward. Through the arena's open dome, a small cargo ship descended, trailing smoke from one damaged thruster, its hull patched with mismatched plates that spoke of 1,000 repairs. The ship was human-made, identifiable by its inelegant, boxy design. The Dominion considered human vessels primitive, barely worthy of space travel. This one looked like it had been through a war and lost. "What is the meaning of this?" Vexithor roared, his moment of triumph interrupted. The ship didn't land gracefully. It crashed into the arena floor 20 meters from the ceremony's center, its landing gear shrieking against the obsidian, scoring deep gouges into the polished surface. Dominion guards rushed forward, weapons raised, but the ship's rear ramp was already dropping open with a hydraulic hiss. A figure emerged through the smoke. Human, male, dressed in a battered flight suit that had once been grey, but was now a patchwork of stains and burns. He couldn't have been more than 30 years old, with short dark hair and a face that looked like it hadn't seen a good night's sleep in months. But his eyes, those human eyes that the Dominion so often mocked as being too soft, too emotional, were fixed on Lyra with an intensity that stopped Vexithor mid-stride. "Step away from her," the human said, in accented but clear galactic common. The arena fell silent. Then, after a beat of stunned disbelief, the crowd erupted in laughter. A human giving orders to a Dominion commander. It was absurd. It was hilarious. It was unthinkable. Overseer Krell's voice crackled over the communication system. "Unknown human vessel, you have violated Dominion ceremonial space. Power down your ship and surrender immediately, or you will be destroyed." The human ignored him. He walked toward Lyra with steady steps, his hands raised to show he carried no weapons. But there was something in his posture, something in the set of his jaw, that suggested weapons weren't the only form of danger a person could carry. Vexithor's scales darkened to pure black, a sign of rage in his species. "Human, you dare interrupt my bonding ceremony? You dare set foot in this sacred arena?" "Sacred," the human repeated, his voice flat. "That's what you call this? Forcing someone into slavery and calling it a bond?" He stopped 5 meters from Lyra, still keeping his eyes on her. "I've been watching from orbit. I've seen what you do here. I've seen how you break people." "You've seen nothing," Vexithor snarled. "You're human. Your species is barely tolerated in Dominion space. You have no authority here, no standing, no—" "I have a ship," the human interrupted, "and I have a choice to offer her." He finally looked directly at Lyra, and for the first time since her capture, someone was looking at her like she was a person, not property. "I can't promise you safety," he said quietly, his voice somehow cutting through the arena's noise. "I can't promise you a home or that things will be easy. My ship's barely holding together. I'm probably going to die in the next week or two from making enemies I can't beat, and I don't have the credits to properly feed one person, let alone two. But I can promise you this, if you come with me, nobody will ever force you into anything again, not while I'm breathing." The arena's laughter had died. Now there was only confused murmuring, the collective consciousness of the Dominion, trying to process what it was witnessing. Humans didn't do things like this. Humans were scavengers, merchants, occasional laborers. They understood their place in the galactic hierarchy. They didn't challenge Dominion commanders in ceremonial arenas. Lyra stared at the human, her light patterns frozen in shock. You would die for me. A stranger." "Maybe," he admitted with a slight, sad smile. "But I'd rather live with you as a free person. Come on, we need to move fast." "My ship's about 30 seconds from getting blasted by orbital defense platforms." Vexithor moved with the speed of a trained killer, his hand reaching for the plasma blade at his hip. "She belongs to the Dominion. She belongs to me." The human moved faster, not with a weapon but with something unexpected. He stepped between Lyra and Vexithor, spreading his arms, making himself a shield with nothing but his own body. "Then you'll have to go through me first," he said. It was insane. It was suicidal. The Dominion commander could cut him down in a heartbeat. But something in that simple, stupid act of human courage made Lyra's decision for her. She stood. Her legs still shook, but she stood. And she ran toward the human, toward his battered ship, toward an uncertain future that was nevertheless hers to choose. "Stop them!" Vexithor's roar shook the arena. Guards poured onto the floor, energy weapons charging, but the human was already moving. He grabbed Lyra's hand, his warm fingers closing around her crystalline ones, and they ran together toward the smoking cargo ship. The rear ramp was still down, the interior dark and cramped compared to the grand arena. Weapons fire erupted around them. The human's body jerked as a glancing shot scorched his shoulder, but he didn't slow down. He pulled Lyra up the ramp, and the moment they were inside, he slammed his palm against the control panel. The ramp began to close. Through the narrowing gap, Lyra saw Vexthor reaching the ship, his face twisted with rage. But then they were sealed inside, and the human was already at the controls, his fingers flying over a console that looked like it had been salvaged from 3 different ship types. "Hold on to something," he shouted. The ship lurched upward with a terrible grinding noise. Through the cockpit viewport, Lyra could see the arena falling away, the Dominion crowds scattering, orbital defense platforms beginning to track their trajectory. "They're locking weapons," she whispered, her voice numb with shock at what was happening. "Yeah," the human agreed, yanking the control yoke hard to the left. "They do that." The ship shuddered as energy blasts clipped its shields, which promptly failed with a shower of sparks from an overhead panel. The human cursed in a language Lyra didn't recognize and pushed the engines harder. The whole vessel screamed in protest. "What's your name?" he called over the noise. "Lyra," she managed. "I'm Lyra. Nice to meet you, Lyra. I'm Jack Morrison, cargo pilot, freelance idiot, and as of about 2 minutes ago, the most wanted human in this sector." He grinned despite the alarm klaxons blaring around them. "Welcome aboard the Memories of Tomorrow." Another blast rocked the ship. Jack's hands never stopped moving, plotting a jump course even as they dodged through a storm of weapons fire. The Dominion fleet was mobilizing, vast warships turning their attention to one tiny, battered cargo vessel. "We'll never make it to the jump point," Lyra said, her analytical mind calculating trajectories even through her shock. "They'll destroy us in 30 seconds. "Probably," Jack agreed. Then he did something that made no sense. He decreased power to the engines and redirected it all to one system, the jump drive. "That's why we're not going to the jump point." "That's impossible. You can't jump from within a gravity well. The stress will tear the ship apart." "First time for everything," Jack said, and there was something wild in his eyes, something that reminded Lyra that humans had a reputation in the galaxy, not for being strong or advanced, but for being unpredictable, for doing things that made no sense, for surviving when they shouldn't. The jump drive engaged with a sound like reality screaming. The last thing Lyra saw through the viewport before they were torn into hyperspace was Commander Vexthor's ship pursuing them, and the last thing she heard was Jack Morrison laughing as his impossible jump broke every law of physics she knew. Then there was nothing but the rushing darkness of hyperspace, and the knowledge that her life had changed forever, that she had been given something she thought she'd never have again, a choice, and she had chosen freedom. Hyperspace shouldn't have felt like drowning, but it did. Lyra's entire body convulsed as the ship tore through dimensions it wasn't designed to navigate, every molecule of her crystalline structure vibrating at frequencies that threatened to shatter her from the inside. "Out!" She could hear Jack screaming something over the alarms, his voice distorted by the reality-warping effects of their impossible jump, but she couldn't make out the words. The Memories of Tomorrow wasn't just protesting anymore, it was dying. Bulkheads groaned and buckled, conduits exploded in cascades of sparks, and through the cockpit viewport, hyperspace itself looked wrong. Instead of the usual smooth tunnel of distorted starlight, they were tumbling through what appeared to be fractured mirrors, each reflection showing a different possible trajectory, a different potential death. Jack's hands moved with desperate precision across controls that were melting under his fingers. "Come on, baby," he muttered to his ship. "You've gotten me through worse. Remember that time in the Kelthera Nebula? This is just like that, except more impossible and with actual physics trying to kill us." "We're going to die," Lyra managed through chattering teeth, her light patterns strobing in distress. "The stress coefficients are beyond any safety margin. The hull will collapse in seconds. Seconds is all we need," Jack shot back, and despite everything, there was no fear in his voice. Just focus, just determination. "I didn't break you out of that arena just to let hyperspace finish what the Dominion started. Hold on." He yanked a lever that should never be pulled during a jump. The emergency displacement field, a last resort system meant only for catastrophic collisions, flooded the ship with a field that temporarily suspended their mass at the cost of burning out the generator forever. It was a trick you could only use once, because after this, that system would be slag. Reality snapped back like a broken rubber band. They crashed out of hyperspace into normal space, with an impact that threw both of them against their restraints. Alarms shrieked in harmony, 3 different fires blazed in the cargo bay, and half the ship's systems went dark. But they were alive, impossibly, stupidly alive. Jack slumped in his seat, breathing hard, smoke rising from his burned hands where he'd gripped the overheated controls. "See?" he wheezed. "Told you. Seconds." Lyra couldn't speak. She was shaking too hard, her entire body a light show of traumatic stress responses. But she was alive, free and alive. The two concepts felt so foreign together that her mind couldn't quite process them. "Where?" she finally managed. "Where are we?" Jack squinted at the barely functional navigation display. "Middle of nowhere. Uncharted system. Mostly debris field and dead planets. No Dominion presence because there's nothing here worth claiming." He coughed, and Lyra noticed with alarm that there was blood on his lips. The jump had hurt him too, human bodies just as fragile as her crystalline form, just expressing damage differently. "You're injured," she said, unbuckling her restraints and moving toward him on unsteady legs. "Let me see." "I'm fine," he said automatically, then winced as he tried to move his shoulder. "Okay, maybe not fine, but I've had worse." Lyra gently pulled aside his torn flight suit. The plasma burn from the arena was deeper than she'd thought, the flesh angry and blistered. Among her people, healers had been sacred, their knowledge passed down through generations. She was no healer, but she remembered some techniques, some applications of her people's natural properties. "Hold still," she instructed. Placing her crystalline hands over the wound, she concentrated, dimming her light patterns to a soft, steady blue glow. Velthran skin could emit certain frequencies that promoted cellular regeneration in other species. It was a small gift, one that had made her people valuable as slaves before the Dominion had decided extinction was more profitable than preservation. Jack hissed at the initial contact, then his eyes widened as the pain began to recede. "What are you doing?" "Helping," she said simply. "You saved me. This is the least I can do." They sat in silence for a moment, the ship's groaning and crackling the only sounds beyond their breathing. Then Jack laughed, a tired, slightly hysterical sound. "I really didn't think that through, did I? Crashing a Dominion ceremony, making an enemy of a commander, destroying my only jump drive getting us out. I'm usually better at planning." "Why did you do it?" Lyra asked, her hands still glowing over his wound. "You don't know me. You owed me nothing. Why would you risk everything?" Jack was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer, more vulnerable than the confident pilot who'd faced down Vex Thor. "Because I know what it's like," he said, "to have no choice, to be trapped, to watch someone more powerful than you decide your entire future while you're helpless to stop it." He looked at her, and she saw old pain in those human eyes. "I couldn't save the people I cared about when it mattered, but I could save you. So I did. Maybe it was stupid. Maybe we're both going to die out here in this wreck of a ship, but at least you got to choose to be here. That matters." Lyra's light patterns shifted to a warm amber, the color of gratitude among her people. "It matters more than you know. Among the Veltran, bonds were sacred because they were chosen. What you offered me in that arena, true choice, that was more valuable than any treasure in the Dominion." "Well, I'm glad," Jack said with a weak smile. "Though I should probably warn you that treasure is something I'm pretty short on. The memories of tomorrow isn't exactly a luxury liner." As if to emphasize his point, another panel sparked and went dark. Jack winced and stood, swaying slightly, then made his way to the engineering station. The damage report made him groan. "Okay, so here's our situation. The good news is we're alive. The bad news is pretty much everything else. We've got life support for maybe 3 days if we're lucky. Engines are at 20%. Shields are completely gone. The jump drive is literally a melted lump of metal now. We've got enough fuel for maybe 1 system hop if we're efficient. And food." He checked a supply locker and pulled out 2 ration bars that looked older than Lyra. "Yeah, we're going to get real hungry real fast." "Can you repair the ship?" Lyra asked, moving to his side to look at the systems display. Even damaged, she could recognize quality when she saw it, and this ship, despite its appearance, had good bones beneath all the patches and improvised fixes. "Some of it, maybe, but we need parts, materials, and more importantly, a dock where someone won't immediately report us to the Dominion." Jack pulled up a star chart, most of which was corrupted from the impossible jump, but enough remained to show their options. "There's a station about 6 light-years from here. Nowhere Station, they call it. It's in neutral space, technically not under Dominion control. Smugglers, refugees, people who don't ask questions. If we can make it there, I might be able to scrounge up enough parts to keep us flying." "And if they do ask questions," Lyra said, "I'm fairly distinctive. The last free Velthran in the galaxy. There will be bounties." "Huge bounties," Jack agreed. Vexthor isn't going to let this go. The Dominion doesn't tolerate defiance, especially not from humans. We embarrassed them in front of thousands of witnesses. He turned to face her fully. Which brings me to something important. You don't have to stay with me, Lyra. Once we get to Nowhere Station, if you want to disappear, find your own way, I'll understand. I got you out. That was the promise. I don't expect— Stop, Lyra interrupted, her light patterns flashing with surprising intensity. Jack Morrison, you pulled me from slavery. You nearly died getting us to safety. You destroyed your ship's jump drive for a stranger. I'm not leaving. It's going to be dangerous, he warned. The Dominion has a long reach. They'll be hunting us. Then they'll be hunting both of us, she said firmly. Besides, you need me. This ship is falling apart and you're one person. I may not be a pilot, but I was educated in systems engineering before my world fell. I can help you keep this vessel flying. Jack studied her for a moment. Then that tired smile returned, but warmer this time, more genuine. You know what? I think that's the best offer I've had in years. Welcome to the crew of the Memories of Tomorrow, Lyra. Population, 2 idiots with terrible luck and worse judgment. I think our judgment was excellent, Lyra said, returning his smile with a brightening of her patterns. We chose freedom. Everything else is just details. They spent the next several hours working together to stabilize the ship. Lyra proved to be more than competent with technical systems, her crystalline fingers able to reach into tight spaces, and her analytical mind quickly grasping the ship's chaotic wiring schemes. Jack, despite his injuries and exhaustion, moved through the vessel with the practiced ease of someone who knew every rivet and weld by heart. As they worked, they talked. Jack told her about his life, about growing up on a human colony world that had been absorbed by the Dominion through voluntary integration, which was what they called conquest when it involved minimal bloodshed. He told her about losing his family when the Dominion's reshaping of their economy destroyed their farm, about running away to space at 16 and learning to fly in cargo haulers and mining rigs, about eventually scraping together enough credits to buy this wreck of a ship. Lyra told him about the Veltran, about a people whose entire culture had been built around light and choice and connection. She told him about the day the Dominion came, about watching her world burn from orbit as they decided her people's unique properties made them too dangerous to allow to flourish. She told him about being one of the few survivors, kept in stasis for years, only brought out when the Dominion needed a rare specimen for their ceremonies. We're both ghosts in a way, Jack said quietly as they worked to patch a hull breach with emergency sealant. Remnants of things the Dominion destroyed. Maybe that's why I couldn't leave you there. Felt like leaving myself. Perhaps, Lyra agreed. Or perhaps you're simply a better person than most. The galaxy is full of beings who talk about honor and duty and civilization. But when it mattered, when I needed someone to actually do something good with no benefit to themselves, it was a human who answered. Jack chuckled. Don't let the Dominion hear you say that. They've spent centuries convincing everyone that humans are barely above vermin on the galactic scale. Then the Dominion doesn't understand strength, Lyra said, her patterns glowing with conviction. Strength isn't just physical power or advanced technology. It's choosing to help someone when helping might destroy you. That's strength. That's courage. And in that arena, you showed more of both than any Dominion warrior I've ever seen. They worked through the ship's night cycle, pushing themselves despite exhaustion, because stopping meant thinking about how impossible their situation was, how outmatched they were, how the entire weight of the Dominion Empire was probably already mobilizing to crush them. Finally, as artificial dawn began to lighten the ship's interior, Jack collapsed into the pilot's seat and initiated the calculations for the jump to Nowhere Station. The ship groaned in protest, but the engines barely responded. We'll make it, he said, though he sounded like he was trying to convince himself. 6 light years. Standard jump, nothing fancy. The old girl can handle that much. Lyra sat in the co-pilot's chair, her crystalline hands folded in her lap. Through the viewport, she could see the debris field surrounding them, the remnants of dead worlds and forgotten battles. It should have been depressing, this graveyard of cosmic ambitions. But instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Jack, she said quietly, thank you. Not just for saving me, but for giving me back something I thought I'd lost forever. What's that? He asked, his eyes on the jump calculations. A future, she said simply. Jack looked at her then, and in that moment something passed between them. Not a forced bond, not a collar of enslavement, but something far more powerful. A choice made by 2 people to face the impossible together. an understanding that whatever came next, they would face it side by side. "Then let's make it a good one," Jack said, and engaged the jump drive. The memories of tomorrow lurched into hyperspace, battered and burning but still flying. Behind them, unknown to either Jack or Lyra, the Dominion fleet had already begun its hunt. Commander Vexthor stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tracking data that showed their escape trajectory. "Find them," he commanded his officers. "I want that human and that Velthrin found alive. I'm going to make an example of them that will echo across every system in the Dominion. No one defies me. No one takes what is mine." But as his ship prepared to follow, as the hunt began in earnest, neither Vexithor nor his officers could have known that the impossible jump had done something unexpected. Jack Morrison's desperate gamble had scattered their trail across hyperspace in ways that no tracking system could easily follow. They had bought themselves time, not much time, but enough. Enough to reach Nowhere Station, enough to make new allies, new plans. Enough to begin something that would shake the Dominion to its foundations. Because sometimes, in the vast and uncaring universe, all you needed was one human who refused to accept the way things were, and one person willing to believe that things could be different. Sometimes that was enough to start a revolution. Nowhere Station hung in the void like a rusted crown, a massive ring of salvaged metal and repurposed warship hulls that had been welded together over decades by outcasts, smugglers, and refugees. It orbited nothing, anchored to space itself through gravity generators that hummed with stolen Dominion technology. As the memories of tomorrow limped toward the docking bays, Lyra could see the patchwork nature of the station, how it had grown organically, chaotically, a monument to survival outside the law. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Jack said with genuine fondness as he guided the dying ship through the approach vector. "Every piece of junk here represents someone who refused to bend the knee to the Dominion or the other empires. Pirates, political refugees, species nobody else wants. This is where the galaxy's unwanted come to exist." "It looks like it could fall apart at any moment," Lyra observed, watching a section of outer hull vent atmosphere before emergency seals slammed into place. "It could," Jack agreed cheerfully. "Probably will someday, but not today. Today it's going to be our salvation, assuming we can afford docking fees." He checked his credit account and winced, "Which we probably can't. But I know people. I've done jobs for half the scavengers here. Someone will give us a break." The docking controller's voice crackled over the comm, speaking in heavily accented galactic common. "Unknown vessel, identify yourself and state your business. And if you're planning to explode, do it somewhere else. We just patched Section 7. "This is Captain Jack Morrison of the Memories of Tomorrow," Jack replied, putting on his most charming voice, "requesting emergency docking and repair services. I've got damaged systems, minimal fuel, and I'm good for the credits." Eventually, there was a pause, then a different voice came on, older and gruffer. "Morrison, that you? It's been what, 2 years?" Jack's face split into a genuine grin. "Caro, holy stars, you're still running traffic control. Someone's got to keep this rust bucket organized. What happened to you? Your ship looks like it went through a black hole. Long story, very long story. Involves the Dominion, a ceremony, and some choices I maybe should have thought through more carefully." Another pause, longer this time. When Caro spoke again, his voice was careful. "Jack, please tell me you didn't do what I think you did." "Depends on what you think I did. The bounty came through 3 hours ago. Every station in 7 sectors got it. 1 human pilot, description matching you exactly, and 1 Velthrin female, last of her kind. Reward for capture. Enough credits to buy a small moon. Wanted by Commander Vexithor personally." Caro's voice dropped. "Jack, what the hell were you thinking?" Lyra's light patterns flickered with distress, but Jack just sighed. "I was thinking someone needed help. Can you give us a berth or not?" The silence stretched. Lyra could feel her heart's pounding, could imagine the docking controller doing the calculations, weighing credits against loyalty, profit against principle. This was it, their first real test. If they were turned away here with their ship barely functional, they had nowhere else to go. "Bay 17, Caro finally said. "It's in the old section, minimal surveillance, and the locals know how to mind their own business. You've got 48 hours, Jack. After that, I can't guarantee someone won't notice who you've got with you and decide the bounty's worth the risk." 48 hours, Jack agreed. "Thanks, Caro. I owe you. You owe me nothing. Just don't get yourself killed. The station's boring enough without you showing up to cause trouble every few years." The comm cut off, and Jack expertly guided the ship into Bay 17, which turned out to be exactly as advertised. Old, poorly lit, and tucked away in a section of the station that looked like it had been forgotten by whatever passed for maintenance crews. The moment they touched down, alarms blared as the ship's systems finally gave up the ghost. Emergency lights cast everything in red, and the engines died with a wheeze that sounded almost apologetic. "Well," Jack said, staring at the dead console, "she got us here. That's all I could ask." They gathered what few possessions they had, which in Lyra's case was nothing but the ceremonial robe she'd been forced into, and in Jack's case was a battered duffel bag that contained a spare flight suit, a small toolkit, and what looked like an old photograph carefully wrapped in protective film. He caught her looking at it and quickly tucked it deeper into the bag. "Family," he said quietly. "From before." Lyra nodded, understanding. They all carried ghosts. The station's atmosphere hit them like a physical force when they opened the airlock. It was warm, humid, and smelled of 1,000 different species living in close quarters. Recycled air mixed with cooking smoke, machine oil, and something organic that Lyra couldn't identify. The docking bay itself was crowded with ships in various states of repair, and beings of dozens of species moved through the organized chaos, hauling cargo, negotiating deals, and carefully not looking too closely at anyone else's business. "Stay close," Jack murmured, placing himself slightly in front of Lyra. "Keep your head down. Your light patterns are distinctive, and even in a place like this, someone might recognize what you are." Lyra dimmed her patterns as much as she could, trying to make herself less noticeable, but it was difficult. Velthrin couldn't completely suppress their natural luminescence any more than humans could stop their hearts from beating. She settled for a soft, neutral grey glow that she hoped would be mistaken for common bioluminescence. They made their way through the station's corridors, which were a maze of repurposed ship passages, carved rock from an ancient asteroid, and new construction that didn't quite match the old. Every few meters brought them past shops, bars, and establishments that catered to needs both legal and decidedly not. Jack seemed to know the layout instinctively, leading them deeper into the station's core. "Where are we going?" Lyra asked, trying to keep track of the turns but losing count after the 7th intersection. "To see an old friend," Jack replied. "Someone who owes me a favor and might be willing to help. His name's Torvin. He's a chromath, which means he's big, he's scary-looking, but he's got a good heart under all those spikes and armor plates." They descended 3 levels via a cargo lift that groaned ominously, then walked through what appeared to be a marketplace where vendors sold everything from fresh food to weapons to cybernetic implants. Lyra noticed several beings staring at her, their eyes calculating, but Jack's presence and the way he walked with casual confidence, his hand never far from the small plasma pistol at his hip, seemed to discourage direct approach. Finally, they reached a shop front that proclaimed itself Torvin's Salvage and Technical Solutions in 5 different languages. The door was massive, clearly designed for someone much larger than human-sized. Jack pressed the comm button. "Torvin, it's Jack. I need help." A voice like grinding boulders responded. "Jack Morrison, I heard you died in the outer reaches." "Rumors, clearly." "Not yet. Can we come in? It's important." The door slid open with a hiss of hydraulics. Inside, the shop was crammed floor to ceiling with salvage technology, spare parts, and equipment that ranged from standard to highly illegal. And standing at a workbench, silhouetted against the glow of a welding torch, was Torvin. Chromath were known throughout the galaxy as warriors and mercenaries, their 8-foot frames covered in natural armor plates, their forearms capable of wielding multiple weapons simultaneously. But Torvin had left that life behind, judging by the welding goggles perched on his massive head and the grease stains covering his apron. He turned to face them, his compound eyes focusing on Jack first, then moving to Lyra. Those eyes widened. "By the 7 hells," Torvin rumbled. "Jack, please tell me that's not what I think it is. If you think it's the last free Velthrin in the galaxy, and that I just rescued her from a Dominion bonding ceremony, then yes, that's exactly what it is." Torvin set down his welding torch with exaggerated care. "You magnificent idiot. You beautiful suicidal fool. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Made a lot of powerful enemies," Jack suggested. "You've started a war," Torvin roared, but despite his volume there was something almost like admiration in his voice. "The Dominion doesn't just let someone steal from them in front of thousands of witnesses. Vexthor won't stop hunting you, ever. And when word spreads about what you did, every bounty hunter, mercenary, and opportunist in 7 sectors is going to be looking for you. I know, Jack said quietly. That's why I need your help. My ship's barely functional. We need repairs, supplies, and probably a way to change our identities if we're going to have any chance of survival. Torvin's gaze moved to Lyra, studying her with an intensity that made her want to dim her patterns further. You're really Velthrin. I thought your kind was extinct. Almost, Lyra said, finding her voice. The Dominion keeps a few of us in stasis, for ceremonies, for trophies. Barbarians, Torvin spat. Then, surprisingly, he gave what might have been a bow, difficult to tell with his anatomy. Torvin of Chromath Clan Steelbreaker at your service. Any enemy of the Dominion is a friend of mine, and anyone brave enough to spit in Commander Vexthor's face deserves respect. I didn't spit in his face, Jack protested. I just told him he couldn't have her. Same thing to them, Torvin said with what might have been a laugh. Sit, both of you. You look half dead, and she looks like she's never seen the real galaxy before. We need to talk about what comes next. They sat at a table that Torvin cleared with one sweep of his massive arm, sending components clattering to the floor. He brought them water, real water, not recycled station supply, and some kind of protein bar that actually tasted edible. For a moment they just ate in silence, the first real food they'd had since the escape. First things first, Torvin said, his business mind clearly working. Your ship, the memories of tomorrow, yes? I remember her. Good bones, terrible maintenance. How bad? Jump drives completely gone, Jack listed. Shields are slag. Engines at maybe 20%. Hull breaches in 4 sections. Life support failing. Navigation system corrupted from the impossible jump. Basically everything except the toilet is broken, and I'm not confident about the toilet. Impossible jump? Torvin's eyes widened again. You jumped from inside a gravity well? Had to. Only way to scatter our hyperspace signature enough to lose pursuit. That's... Torvin paused, searching for words. That's the most insane, brilliant, stupid thing I've ever heard. No wonder your ship's destroyed. You're lucky to be alive. We've been hearing that a lot, Lyra said softly. Torvin looked at her with something like pity. Child, do you understand what this human did for you? He didn't just risk his life, he threw away his entire existence. The Dominion will hunt him forever now. There's no going back to any kind of normal life. Every port, every station, every system with Dominion presence will be death for him. I know, Lyra said, her light patterns showing determination. That's why I'm staying with him. He gave me choice. I choose to face what comes next together. Torvin was quiet for a moment, then made a sound that might have been approval. You have spirit. Good. You'll need it. He turned to Jack. I can repair your ship. It'll take time, credits and parts I'll have to acquire through less than legal channels. 2 weeks minimum, probably longer. And it won't be pretty. But I can make her fly again. Credits are a problem, Jack admitted. I've got maybe 2,000 left. Not nearly enough. No, Torvin agreed. Full repairs would run you closer to 50,000. But we're not doing full repairs, we're doing survival repairs. The minimum to keep you flying and fighting. That I can do for what you have. Plus, you work for me while you're here. I've got salvage jobs that need a human's smaller hands and a pilot's instincts. Deal, Jack said immediately. Good. Now, the bigger problem. Your faces. By now, your images are on every bounty board in the sector. Jack, you're distinctive enough, but we can help. Fake scars, hair dye, maybe some temporary biomods to change your facial structure slightly. Nothing permanent, but enough to pass casual inspection. Lyra, you're harder. Veltrin aren't exactly common, and your light patterns are unique to your species. I could try to suppress them more, Lyra offered. No, Torvin said firmly. Suppressing them completely would kill you. Your people use light like humans use speech. It's involuntary at a deep level. But we can mask you. Clothing that diffuses the light, holographic overlays, maybe even some signal dampeners. We make you look like a different bioluminescent species. There are a dozen kinds in the galaxy. One more won't draw attention. They spent the next hour planning, Torvin pulling up schematics and supply lists, calculating costs and timelines. As they worked, Lyra began to understand something about the galaxy beyond the Dominion's reach. Here in places like Nowhere Station, there was a different kind of order. Not the rigid hierarchy of empires, but a chaotic web of favors, debts, and mutual survival. People helped each other not because they were ordered to, but because today you might need help, and tomorrow you might be the one offering it. It was messy, it was unpredictable, but it was free. There's one more thing, Torvin said as their planning wound down. Word about what you did is spreading. Not just the bounty, but the story. A human defying a Dominion commander to save a captive. It's the kind of thing people talk about, the kind of thing that gives others ideas. Ideas are dangerous, Jack muttered. Ideas are necessary, Torvin countered. The Dominion has ruled through fear for generations. They make examples of anyone who resists. But you didn't just resist, Jack. You won. You got away. And that means others might try. The slave who thinks about running. The conquered world that thinks about rebellion. The merchant who thinks about refusing Dominion tariffs. You've become a symbol whether you wanted to or not. I just wanted to help one person, Jack said quietly. And that, Torvin said with something like wonder in his gravelly voice, is why it matters. You didn't do it for glory or profit. You did it because it was right. That's human courage. That's what the Dominion fears most. Not your weapons or your technology, which are inferior to theirs. They fear your capacity to act on principle even when it's suicidal. Lyra reached out and placed her crystalline hand over Jack's scarred human one. Then we'll be symbols together, for everyone who's still trapped, for everyone who dreams of freedom. Jack looked at their joined hands, then up at Torvin, then back to Lyra. Despite everything, despite the impossible odds and the Empire hunting them, he smiled. All right then, let's be symbols, but let's be alive symbols. Can't inspire anyone if we're dead. Torvin's laugh shook the shop, spoken like a true survivor. Now, both of you need rest. Real rest, not the kind you get in a dying ship. I've got quarters in the back, basic but clean and safe. Sleep. Tomorrow we start the real work of keeping you alive and getting you back in the black. As they stood to follow Torvin to the back rooms, an alarm blared through the station's corridors. Not an emergency alarm, but something else. An arrival notification. Torvin's expression darkened as he pulled up a station feed. On the screen, a massive Dominion warship was entering the system. Not just any warship. Commander Vex Thor's flagship. They found us, Lyra whispered, her light patterns flickering with fear. No, Torvin said, studying the feed. They found Nowhere Station. They're going to search every ship, every berth. They'll tear this place apart looking for you. Jack's hand went to his pistol, a gesture Lyra realized was instinctive when he was calculating odds. How long do we have? Hours at most before they dock and start their search. Maybe less if they decide to just threaten the station into surrendering you. Then we run, Jack said. We take the ship as is and— Your ship can't fly, Torvin interrupted. Even basic repairs take time. If you launch now, you'll die in vacuum before you clear the system. They stared at the screen, watching the warship approach like a predator closing in on wounded prey. After everything, after their impossible escape and desperate journey, it seemed the hunt was ending here, on a forgotten station at the edge of nowhere. But Lyra felt something stirring inside her. Not just fear, but something else. Something that had been sleeping since her world fell. The light patterns on her skin began to pulse with a rhythm she hadn't felt in years. Defiance. Then we don't run, she said quietly, and both Jack and Torvin turned to stare at her. We fight. Jack stared at Lyra like she'd just suggested they fight the ocean with their bare hands. Fight. Lyra, that's a Dominion warship. It has enough firepower to turn this entire station into debris. We can't fight that. Not the ship, Lyra said, her light patterns pulsing with a strange intensity. But we can fight what it represents. We can show everyone here that the Dominion isn't invincible, that someone can stand against them and survive. Torvin's compound eyes studied her with new interest. You're not talking about weapons. You're talking about morale. I'm talking about choice, Lyra corrected. Right now, everyone on this station is calculating whether to turn us in. They're thinking about credits, about avoiding Dominion wrath, about survival. But what if we gave them something worth more than credits? What if we gave them hope? Jack ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration and stress that Lyra was learning to recognize. I appreciate the sentiment, but hope doesn't stop plasma cannons. No, Torvin said slowly, his massive form shifting as he thought, but it does stop collaboration. If the people of Nowhere Station believe in what you represent, if they see you as something worth protecting, they won't help Vex Thor hunt you. And this station is a maze. Even a Dominion commander can't search every corridor, every hidden compartment, every bolt hole without local cooperation. You're suggesting we hide and hope the station residents don't sell us out? Jack said skeptically. I'm suggesting we make them not want to, Torvin replied. We make your story real. We let people see you, talk to you, understand what you did and why. The Dominion rules through fear and distance. They're untouchable, unreachable, but you're here. You're real. You're someone who stood up to them and won. Lyra's light patterns brightened. Yes, exactly. Jack, you said it yourself earlier. We've become symbols whether we wanted to or not. So let's be good symbols. Let's show people that the Dominion can be defied. And if it doesn't work, Jack asked quietly, if someone decides the bounty is worth more than the story, then we were going to be caught anyway, Lyra said. At least this way we try. At least this way we stand for something instead of just running. Jack looked between them, these two beings who had somehow become his allies in the span of days. A Cromath warrior who'd walked away from violence to build things instead. A Velthran survivor who'd found courage in the ruins of her people. And himself, a cargo pilot who'd never wanted to be a hero, but couldn't seem to stop making choices that put him in that role anyway. This is a terrible plan, he finally said. Yes, Torvin agreed. It's probably going to get us killed, Jack continued. Most likely, Lyra confirmed, and I'm going to do it anyway because apparently I've lost my mind. Jack sighed deeply. All right. How do we make Nowhere Station care enough to protect us? Torvin's smile was a terrifying sight on his massive face. We throw you a party. 2 hours later, the central hub of Nowhere Station was more crowded than it had been in months. The hub was a massive open space near the station's core, originally designed as a market and gathering place, now serving as the closest thing the station had to a town square. Word had spread fast, carried by Torvin's contacts and the station's rumor network, which operated faster than any communication system. The human and the Velthran were here, the ones from the bounty, the ones who'd humiliated the Dominion, and they wanted to talk. Jack stood on an improvised platform made of cargo containers, his stomach churning with nerves. Public speaking had never been his strength. Fighting, flying, fixing things with inadequate tools, those he could do. But this, standing in front of hundreds of beings from dozens of species, all staring at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to calculation to outright hostility, this was terrifying. Lyra stood beside him, her light patterns deliberately bright now, announcing what she was to anyone with eyes. In the crowd, Jack could see species he recognized, and many he didn't. Humans were scattered throughout, looking at him with expressions he couldn't quite read. There were Cromath like Torvin, their armor plates gleaming, scaled Vrexians, insectoid Chithra, gaseous Nephili in containment suits, and dozens more. The galaxy's unwanted gathered to see what he had to say. I'm not good at speeches, Jack began, his voice amplified by a speaker system Torvin had rigged. I'm a pilot. I haul cargo, fix ships, try to stay alive in a galaxy that's not particularly friendly to humans who don't have powerful friends or family connections. Most of you probably understand that. Most of you are here because you didn't fit into the Dominion's perfect order, or because you refused to, or because they destroyed everything you had, and this was the only place left to go. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. 3 days ago I did something stupid, Jack continued. I crashed a Dominion bonding ceremony and rescued someone who was about to be enslaved. I did it because I couldn't stand watching it happen, because I've lost too many people to the Dominion's idea of order, and I was tired of being helpless. So I stopped being helpless. I made a choice. He gestured to Lyra. This is Lyra. She's Velthran, which means she's probably the last free member of her species. The Dominion killed her people because they were too dangerous to allow to exist freely. They kept a few in stasis as trophies, bringing them out for ceremonies when they wanted to show off their power. Lyra was about to be bonded to a commander, forced into a connection that would destroy her free will and make her a slave in everything but name. Lyra stepped forward, her light patterns pulsing with emotion. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear, carrying through the hub. I spent years in stasis, frozen, waiting to be used as a decoration in someone else's story. I thought I would die that way, never having lived, never having chosen anything. But then this human, who had no reason to help me, who gained nothing from helping me, crashed his ship into an arena and offered me something I thought was lost forever. Choice. The crowd had gone quiet, listening with an attention that surprised Jack. Now the Dominion is hunting us, Lyra continued. Commander Vex's Thor has come to this station with a warship and demands that we be surrendered. He's offering a reward large enough to make anyone wealthy, large enough to buy safety from Dominion scrutiny for years. And I don't blame anyone here if they decide that reward is worth more than 2 strangers. But I want you to understand something, she said, her light patterns blazing now with an intensity that illuminated the nearest faces in the crowd. If you give us to them, you're not just trading 2 lives for credits. You're confirming what the Dominion has always said about places like this, that everyone has a price. That freedom is something you sell when the offer gets high enough. That resistance is futile because eventually, everyone breaks. Jack watched faces in the crowd, trying to gauge reactions. Some were nodding, some looked conflicted, some still had that calculating look that said they were weighing options. Then a voice called out from the crowd, human, male, older. "Why should we risk Dominion wrath for you? You're just two people. What difference does it make?" It was a fair question, Jack thought. The practical question. The survival question. He'd asked himself the same thing in the arena before crashing the ceremony. But before he could answer, someone else spoke. A Chithra, her insectoid features making her expressions hard to read, but her voice was clear. "Because we're all just two people. Every single one of us here came to Nowhere Station because the Dominion or some other empire decided we didn't matter. If we let them take these two, what's stopping them from coming back for one of us next time they want to make an example?" Another voice, a Chromath even larger than Torvin. "The commander insulted this station by coming here with demands. Nowhere Station is neutral territory. We don't recognize Dominion authority." "Neutral territory that can be destroyed by one warship," someone else countered. "Let's be practical. We can't fight the Dominion." "We don't have to fight them," Torvin's voice boomed as he climbed onto the platform. "We just have to not help them. This station is 10,000 corridors, 50,000 residents, and 100 years of improvised construction that even we don't fully understand. If we don't want someone found, they won't be found, not without tearing this place apart bolt by bolt." "And you think they won't?" The skeptical voice again. "How you think Commander Vex's Thor will just leave peacefully?" "No," Jack said. "I think he'll threaten, I think he'll bluster. I think he'll try to intimidate you into compliance because that's how the Dominion works. They rely on fear. They rely on everyone believing they're inevitable. But here's the thing about inevitability. It only works if everyone believes in it." He took a breath, gathering his courage. "I can't promise you that protecting us won't have consequences. I can't promise the Dominion won't remember this. But I can promise you this. If you help them, if you give in to their demands, they'll keep coming back. Because once they know you'll break under pressure, you'll never be free of that pressure. But if you stand firm, if you show them that Nowhere Station answers to no empire, then maybe, just maybe, you'll earn something worth more than temporary safety." "And what's that?" someone called out. "Respect," Lyra answered. "The knowledge that you stood for something, that you didn't sell out strangers who needed help, that you chose principle over profit. My people believed that bonds were sacred because they were chosen freely. The Dominion perverts that, makes it about force and domination. But what Jack and I are asking you to choose, that's a real bond, a bond of common cause against tyranny." The crowd erupted in argument, dozens of conversations happening at once. Some voices raised in support, others in opposition, most simply uncertain. Jack watched it all, feeling the weight of what they'd set in motion. Then a human woman pushed through the crowd. She was maybe 60 years old, her face lined with age and hardship, wearing the practical coveralls of a station engineer. She climbed onto the platform without asking permission and faced the crowd. "I'm Elena Vasquez," she announced. "I've lived on this station for 30 years. I came here after the Dominion annexed my world and killed my family for resisting their agricultural quotas. For 30 years, I've fixed air recyclers and patched hull breaches and kept this station running because it's the only place in the galaxy where I get to make my own choices. And I'll be damned if I let some Dominion commander take that away by intimidating us into betraying our own values." She turned to Jack and Lyra. "I don't know you. I don't owe you anything. But I remember what it was like to be helpless against the Dominion's power. And I remember wishing, praying, that someone would help, that someone would care. So I'm in. Whatever you need, whatever I can do, I'm in." There was a moment of silence. Then another person stepped forward. A Vrexian youth, his scales still bright with childhood colors. "I'm in too. The Dominion killed my clutch mother. They don't get to win here." Another, a Nephili in their containment suit. "Agreed. We stand together or we fall separately." More voices, more species, more stories of loss and defiance and the desperate need to believe that somewhere, somehow, the Dominion's power could be checked. Not everyone joined. Jack could see beings slipping away into the crowd, making their exits, probably already planning how to collect the bounty. But more stayed than he'd dared hope, more believed than he'd thought possible. Torvin leaned close to Jack's ear. "You understand what you've done. You've just turned Nowhere Station into a resistance cell. That's going to have consequences far beyond today. I know, Jack said quietly. But Lyra's right. We were symbols anyway. Might as well be good ones. The platform shuddered as the entire station structure groaned. Through the viewport in the hub's ceiling, they could see Vexithor's warship moving closer, its weapons arrays visible even at this distance. He's hailing the station, Torvin said, checking a handheld communicator, demanding to speak to whoever's in charge, which is complicated because nobody's really in charge here. We operate by consensus and mutual irritation. Let me talk to him, Lyra said suddenly. He wants me. Let him see that I'm not afraid of him anymore. Lyra, that's dangerous, Jack protested. If he sees you're here, if he knows for certain— He already knows, she interrupted. This isn't about hiding anymore. This is about showing him that he can't intimidate us, that his power ends where our courage begins. She walked to the communication panel before anyone could stop her, her crystalline fingers activating the station-wide channel. When she spoke, her voice was broadcast not just through Nowhere Station, but to the warship looming outside. Commander Vexithor, this is Lyra, the Velthran you tried to enslave. I know you can hear me. I know you've come to drag me back to your ceremony, to your collar, to your idea of a bond. But I have a message for you. I choose to stay here. These people, this station, they're more worthy of bonding with than you or your empire ever were. They understand something you don't. That true strength comes from choice, not force. That real bonds form between equals, not master and slave. The communication panel crackled. Then Vexithor's voice came through, dripping with contempt. Foolish child. You think these mongrels can protect you? You think a station full of refugees and criminals can stand against the Dominion? I will give them 1 hour to surrender you both. After that, I will demonstrate what happens to those who harbor fugitives from Dominion justice. Do what you must, Lyra responded, her light patterns steady now, resolved. But know this, every moment you threaten us, every moment you waste trying to force compliance, word spreads. People across the galaxy are hearing about what happened in that arena. They're learning that a human cared enough to save a stranger, that someone stood up to you and won. You're not just hunting us, Commander. You're creating a story that will outlive us all. The communication cut off. In the silence that followed, Jack realized they'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. This wasn't just about 2 fugitives anymore. It was about whether Nowhere Station, and by extension every free port and neutral haven in the galaxy, would bend to Dominion demands. He's going to attack, someone in the crowd said. He can't let this stand. His pride won't allow it. Then we defend, Elena Vasquez said firmly. This station has weapons, old weapons, salvaged weapons, weapons we've kept hidden for a day like this. We're not helpless. We're also not warship-ready, Torvin cautioned. Our defenses are meant to deter pirates, not Dominion military vessels. Then we get creative, Jack said, his mind already working through possibilities. Torvin, you said this station is a maze, right? Can we control where Vexithor goes if he boards? If we cut power to certain sections, seal certain bulkheads, yes, we could funnel boarding parties into kill zones, but that requires coordination and people willing to fight. We have people, Elena said, gesturing to the crowd. We have anger, determination, and home territory advantage. That's more than most resistance movements start with. Jack looked at Lyra, seeing in her light patterns the same desperate hope he felt in his chest. They'd started this with an impulsive rescue. Now they were organizing an actual resistance. It was madness. It was impossible. It was necessary. All right, he said. We have 1 hour. Let's make it count. The next hour was chaos. Torvin and Elena organized the defense, identifying choke points and distributing weapons from hidden armories that apparently every section of the station maintained. Jack helped coordinate communication networks, ensuring that different areas of the station could warn each other about boarding party movements. Lyra, to her surprise, found herself working with the station's small medical team, preparing emergency aid stations. And through it all, word continued to spread, not just through Nowhere Station, but beyond. Someone had been recording Lyra's confrontation with Vexithor. The video was bouncing through communication networks, being picked up by news services, spreading across planets and systems faster than any Dominion censorship could stop it. The story was loose in the galaxy now. The human and the Velthran, the pilot and the prisoner, the defiance and the choice. When the hour ended, Commander Vexithor's warship opened fire. Not on the station directly, but on the surrounding space, a demonstration of power meant to terrify. Energy blasts vaporized derelict ships and asteroids, lighting up the void with destructive force. Then the boarding ships launched, dozens of them, carrying Dominion soldiers in full battle armor. The defense of Nowhere Station had begun. The first boarding pod hit Section 12 with enough force to crack the outer hull. Dominion soldiers poured out in disciplined formation, their armor gleaming, their weapons charged and ready. They expected terrified civilians. They expected quick surrender. They expected easy victory. What they got was a hail of improvised explosives and a corridor that suddenly depressurized, venting half their squad into space before emergency bulkheads slammed down. Jack watched the chaos unfold through a dozen security feeds hastily patched into Torvin's workshop, which had become their makeshift command center. The station's defenders were fighting with desperation and creativity, using their intimate knowledge of every corridor, every access tunnel, every hidden passage to ambush the invaders and then vanish before reinforcements could arrive. Section 12 is holding, Elena Vasquez reported from her position, coordinating the eastern defenses. But they're taking casualties. We need medical supplies moved up from storage. On it, Lyra responded, her crystalline hands already plotting the safest routes through the station's labyrinthine passages. She'd taken to tactical coordination with a natural aptitude that surprised everyone, including herself. Centuries of her people's strategic knowledge seemed to be waking up in her mind, ancient patterns of defensive warfare that the Veltran had used before their extinction. Another boarding pod struck Section 7, then two more hit the docking bays. Vexthor wasn't being subtle anymore. He was sending everything he had, overwhelming the station's defenses through sheer numbers. "We can't hold all the entry points," Torvin rumbled, his forearms working multiple control panels simultaneously. "We need to choose which sections to defend and which to abandon." "Abandon?" A younger voice, panicked, one of the Rexian defenders. "Those are people's homes. Those are empty corridors if we evacuate them first," Torvin corrected firmly. "We pull everyone back to the core sections, consolidate our forces, make them pay for every meter they advance. A fighting retreat, not a rout." Jack studied the tactical display, seeing the Dominion forces spreading through the station like an infection. But they were spreading thin too, overextending in their confidence. "They're assuming we'll break, that we'll panic and surrender once they're inside. What if we don't retreat? What if we let them think they're winning, let them push deep into the station, then cut them off from their ships?" "That's risky," Elena said. "If we fail to trap them, they'll have control of critical systems." "Everything about this is risky," Jack countered, "but Vexthor thinks he's fighting civilians. He doesn't expect us to have a strategy beyond hiding and hoping. Let's use that arrogance against him." Lyra's light patterns flickered with understanding. "We make the station itself a weapon. We know every passage, every system, every weakness in the structure. They're invading blind, following training and doctrine. We're defending home." "Home," Elena repeated softly, and something passed across her weathered face. "Yes, that's exactly what this is." "All right, Morrison, what do you need?" The next hour became a deadly game of deception and sacrifice. Defenders in outlying sections put up token resistance, just enough to make their retreat look genuine, pulling back and sealing bulkheads behind them. The Dominion forces advanced, securing section after section, reporting victory after victory back to their commander. But with each advance they pushed deeper into a maze that was quietly rearranging itself around them. Power got rerouted, locking blast doors they needed to pass through. Gravity generators mysteriously failed in corridors they were traversing, sending soldiers floating helplessly. Life support cycled between freezing cold and stifling heat, draining their armor's environmental systems. "They're figuring it out," Torvin warned, watching the enemy movement slow and become more cautious. "They're starting to realize this isn't a normal station layout." "Then we spring the trap now," Jack said. "Elena, can you seal the docking bay access? Give me 30 seconds. On the display, Jack could see the main Dominion force, nearly 200 soldiers, deep in the station's industrial sector. Behind them, their path back to the boarding pods was a long, winding route through sections that Nowhere Station's defenders now controlled. "Now!" Jack called. Elena's fingers flew over her console. Throughout the station, bulkheads slammed down, cutting the Dominion forces into isolated pockets. The soldiers in the industrial sector found themselves suddenly trapped, cut off from their ships, surrounded by corridors that were now flooding with defender forces who knew every alternative route. On Vexthor's flagship, alarms must have been blaring. Jack allowed himself a grim smile. The commander had underestimated them, assumed that overwhelming force was enough. But this wasn't a military engagement following the rules he knew. This was asymmetric warfare. And in that game, the side with home advantage had a significant edge. "They're trying to force the bulkheads open," Torvin reported, "cutting through with plasma torches." "Let them," Jack said. "That'll take hours." "Meanwhile, their air is recycling through filters we control. Their communication is bouncing through networks we can monitor. And they're burning through their armor's power cells, trying to stay alive in sections where we've deliberately sabotaged environmental controls." But victory, even tactical victory, came at a cost. Throughout the station, defenders were dying. A Chithra engineer killed when a conduit exploded during a firefight. A human family caught in crossfire despite evacuation orders. A Chromath warrior who held a corridor alone against 20 Dominion soldiers so others could escape, dying where he stood. Each death hit Jack like a physical blow. These weren't soldiers. These were mechanics and merchants, parents and children, people who just wanted to live free from Empire. People who were dying because he and Lyra had brought the Dominion's wrath to their doorstep. "It's not your fault," Lyra said quietly, reading his expression. "They chose this, we all did. Every person fighting right now chose to stand rather than surrender. Honor that choice. Don't diminish it by taking all the responsibility." "She's right," Elena added, her voice crackling over the comm. "I've lived through Dominion occupation. I've seen what happens to people who cooperate, who comply, who give the Empire everything it wants. They still suffer. They still die. Just slowly and without dignity. At least here, at least now, we're dying on our feet." A new alarm cut through the command center. Jack's blood went cold as he saw what was happening on the display. One of the boarding pods, larger than the others, was approaching the station. And this one wasn't heading for the outer sections. It was coming straight for the core, straight for them. Vex Thor's personal transport, Torvin identified, his voice grim. "He's coming himself." He's tired of letting his soldiers do the work. Through the security feeds, they watched the pod breach the station's inner hull with surgical precision, cutting directly into the commercial hub where they'd held their gathering hours before. The ramp dropped, and Commander Vex Thor strode out, his crimson armor gleaming, his personal guard flanking him in perfect formation. He looked directly at the nearest security camera, as if he knew Jack was watching. "Enough games," Vex Thor's voice boomed through every speaker in the station. "I grow tired of this childish resistance. Jack Morrison, Lyra of the Velthrin, you have 5 minutes to surrender yourselves to me, or I will begin executing station residents. 10 every minute, starting with the children." The command center went silent. Even the tactical displays seemed to dim in the wake of that threat. "He wouldn't," someone whispered. "Even the Dominion has rules about non-combatants." "He would," Lyra said, her light patterns gone dark with horror. "I know him. I was supposed to be bonded to him. I've seen his service record. He's put down 3 rebellions by targeting families. He'll do exactly what he says." Jack felt the weight of every death, every consequence of his choice in that arena, crushing down on him. He'd wanted to save one person. Instead, he'd put thousands at risk. And now Vex Thor was going to kill children to prove a point. "We have to surrender," he said, his voice hollow. "We can't let him murder innocents because of us." "No." The voice was firm, unexpected. Elena Vasquez, still at her post, despite the chaos. "No, Jack. That's exactly what he wants. He breaks your will. He breaks all of us. The moment we start negotiating in fear, we've already lost. But the children are ours," Elena interrupted. "Station children, station responsibility. We protect them, not by surrendering, but by fighting smarter." She switched her comm to station-wide. "All families with children, evacuation protocol 7. Move to the emergency shelters in the core. Seal yourselves in. Nobody gets to those shelters without going through every adult on this station first." "You can't fight him," Jack protested. "Vex Thor is a decorated commander. He's killed thousands. He's a trained warrior enhanced with combat genetics. And I'm a grandmother who's very, very angry," Elena said. "Besides, he's not the only one with tricks." On the security feed, Vex Thor was checking a timepiece. 2 minutes had passed. 3. He gestured to his guards, who began dragging forward residents they'd captured during the initial invasion. Jack recognized some of them. The Nephili who'd spoken up in the gathering. A young Chromath barely past adolescence. Vex Thor drew his plasma blade. The weapon hummed to life, glowing with lethal energy. "Time's up," the commander announced. "Since you won't surrender, I'll begin demonstrating the cost of defiance. He raised the blade, and then the lights went out. Not just in the hub, but throughout the entire station. Every light, every display, every system that generated illumination died simultaneously, plunging Nowhere Station into absolute darkness, except for one source of light. Lyra stepped out from the shadows of a side corridor, her crystalline body blazing with luminescence. Every pattern, every light frequency her people had ever used, she channeled them all now, turning herself into a beacon that lit the hub like a star. And in that light, she was magnificent and terrible, a living reminder of a people who'd been slaughtered but refused to die. "You wanted me, Commander," she said, her voice amplified somehow, echoing through the darkened station. "Here I am, but you'll have to come through them to get me." And from the darkness around Vex's Thor, the people of Nowhere Station emerged. Not soldiers, not warriors, just people who'd had enough, people who'd been pushed too far, threatened too often, seen too many friends die. Elena Vasquez led them, a plasma cutter in her weathered hands. Beside her stood dozens, then hundreds, human and alien, young and old, every species represented. They'd given up their positions throughout the station, abandoned the tactical advantages, come here to stand between a Dominion commander and the two people who'd given them something to believe in. Jack ran from the command center, his pistol in hand, knowing he was too late to stop whatever was about to happen, but unable to stay away. Torvin kept pace beside him, the Chromath's heavy footsteps shaking the deck plates. They arrived to find the hub transformed into something between a battlefield and a standoff. Vex Thor and his guards were surrounded, outnumbered 50 to 1. But everyone knew that numbers didn't mean much against Dominion military enhancement. Those guards could kill dozens before being overwhelmed. "This is meaningless," Vex Thor said, his voice carrying contempt. "You're civilians, rabble. You can't fight me." "You're right," Elena agreed. "We probably can't fight you. We're not trained, we're not enhanced. We're just people who are tired of being afraid." She raised her plasma cutter slightly. "But we are people, and that's what you've never understood about humans, about all of us here. We're not just numbers on a casualty report. We're not just resources to be exploited. We're people who make choices, and we choose to stand." "Then you choose to die," Vex Thor snarled. "Maybe," Elena said, "but not without making you pay for every life you take. And more importantly, not without the entire galaxy watching." She gestured upward where maintenance drones floated through the darkened hub, their recording equipment active, their feeds broadcasting live to networks across known space. Millions were watching, billions as the feeds multiplied and spread. "Go ahead, Commander," Elena continued. "Cut down unarmed civilians, kill grandmothers and mechanics and merchants. Do it on camera, where everyone can see exactly what the Dominion really is. See how many systems stay loyal after that." Vex Thor's scales darkened with rage. He was trapped, Jack realized, not by weapons, but by witness. The Dominion maintained power through careful image management, brutal when necessary, but always with plausible justification. But this, massacring civilians on camera while the galaxy watched, that would shatter the illusion of civilized empire. "You think you've won?" Vex Thor said, his voice low and dangerous. "This changes nothing. The Dominion is inevitable. Today, tomorrow, or next year, we will find you. We will take what is ours. And when we do, these people who protected you will suffer the consequences." "No," Jack said, stepping forward into Lyra's light. "You won't, because you don't get it, Vex Thor. You've already lost. Not the battle, not the war, but something more important. You've lost the story." "What?" "Right now across the galaxy, people are watching this. They're seeing you threatening civilians. They're seeing hundreds of ordinary people standing up to Dominion power. They're learning what we learned, that the Empire's strength is based on everyone believing it's unbeatable. But we beat you today. We trapped your forces. We protected our people, and we made you back down. And everyone knows it now." "I haven't backed down," Vex Thor insisted. "Then do it," Jack challenged. "Start killing. But know that every death you inflict right now creates 10 more people who'll resist you tomorrow. Every civilian you murder on camera becomes a martyr. Every act of cruelty becomes evidence that the Dominion isn't the civilized power it claims to be. So go ahead, Commander. Choose what matters more, your pride or the empire you serve." The silence stretched. Jack could feel his heart hammering, could feel the weight of hundreds of lives balanced on this moment. Vex Thor's hand was still on his plasma blade. One move and the killing would start. One decision and everything they'd fought for would end in blood. Slowly, reluctantly, Vex Thor deactivated his weapon. "This isn't over," he said, his voice vibrating with barely controlled fury. "You've made an enemy that will never stop hunting you. The Dominion has a long memory and infinite patience. One day, when you've forgotten to be careful, when you've let your guard down, we will find you. And you will beg for the mercy of that arena ceremony." "We'll take our chances," Lyra said, her light patterns steady and unafraid. Vex's Thor's guards began withdrawing, backing toward their boarding pod with weapons still raised. The crowd parted to let them through, silent witnesses to the commander's retreat. As Vex Thor reached the pod's ramp, he turned back one last time. "You've started something you can't finish," he said to Jack. "You've given people hope, and hope is dangerous. It makes them take risks they shouldn't. It makes them defy power they can't overcome. You're going to get a lot of people killed, Morrison. Can you live with that?" "I don't know," Jack admitted honestly, "but I know I couldn't live with doing nothing. So yeah, I'll take that burden because at least it means I tried." Vex Thor's laugh was bitter, a very human answer. Emotion over logic, idealism over survival. It's why your species will never rule the galaxy. "We don't want to rule," Lyra interjected. "We just want to be free. That's the difference between us and you, Commander. We're fighting for the right to choose our own lives. You're fighting to take that right away from others. History will judge which cause was worth more." The boarding pod sealed shut, thrusters fired, pulling it away from the station. On the security feeds, Jack watched the other Dominion forces receiving withdrawal orders, abandoning their positions and returning to their ships. Within an hour, Vex Thor's entire fleet had departed, leaving Nowhere Station battered, but standing. The crowd in the hub erupted in cheers, but Jack felt numb. They'd won, technically. They'd survived. But Vex Thor was right about one thing. This wasn't over. They'd started something today that would have consequences far beyond this station. Eleanor approached him, her weathered face showing exhaustion and something like wonder. "We did it. We actually sent them away. For now," Jack said. "They'll be back, or someone like them will. We've made Nowhere Station a target." "It was always a target," Elena countered. "We just decided to be a target that fights back. That's worth something." She extended her hand. "Thank you, Jack Morrison, for showing us we could." Jack shook her hand, feeling the calluses earned from decades of honest work, and something inside him broke. He'd been holding himself together through sheer will, but now, in the aftermath, the weight of everything that had happened crashed down on him. He'd nearly gotten everyone killed. He'd turned a simple rescue into a galactic incident. He'd made enemies that would never stop hunting them, but he'd also saved Lyra. He'd inspired people to stand up for themselves. He'd proven that the Dominion could be defied. He didn't know if that made him a hero or a fool. Maybe both, maybe it didn't matter. Lyra's hand found his, her crystalline fingers intertwining with his human ones. Her light patterns had calmed now, settling into soft colors that Jack was learning to interpret. Relief, gratitude, affection. "We should go," she said quietly. "Vex Thor gave us time, but he'll use it to regroup, and next time he comes, he won't underestimate us." "Where do we go?" Jack asked. "My ship still can't jump. We're trapped here until Torvin finishes repairs." "Then we help him," Lyra said simply. "And while we work, we prepare. Because you were right about one thing. We've started a story today. Now we need to figure out how it ends." They made their way back through the celebrating crowd, through corridors scarred by battle and station residents already beginning repairs. Nowhere Station had survived its first real test. But Jack knew, deep in his bones, that it wouldn't be the last. The galaxy was watching now. And once you became a symbol, once you became a story, you couldn't take it back. For better or worse, they were heroes now, and heroes had a nasty habit of dying heroically. 3 weeks after the battle, the memories of tomorrow were still grounded in Bay 17, spread across the deck in pieces, while Torvin worked miracles with salvaged parts and engineering ingenuity. But the ship was changing. No longer just a battered cargo hauler held together by prayer and improvisation, it was being rebuilt as something more. Armor plating from decommissioned fighters, weapon systems scavenged from a dozen different sources, a new jump drive, not as powerful as the original but functional, cobbled together from 3 broken units. Jack watched Torvin install the final power coupling and felt a strange mixture of gratitude and grief. His ship, his home for 10 years, was becoming a warship, because that's what they needed now. Not a cargo hauler, but something that could run and fight when running wasn't enough. "She'll never be pretty," Torvin said, wiping grease from his massive hands, But she'll be fast and dangerous. More importantly, she'll have redundant systems. You can lose half your ship and still limp away. That's what matters now. What matters now? Jack repeated quietly. Everything's about survival now. About the next threat, the next fight. Torvin studied him with those compound eyes that seemed to see everything. You're regretting it. The rescue, the stand, all of it. No, Jack said immediately, then hesitated. Maybe. I don't know. I saved Lyra. I'd do that again in a heartbeat. But everything after, the battle, the deaths, turning Nowhere Station into a target, sometimes I wonder if I just made things worse. Worse than what? Torvin asked. Worse than continuing to let the Dominion do whatever they want to whoever they want. Worse than everyone staying silent while atrocities happen in arenas across the galaxy. He gestured to the station beyond the bay. You see what's happening out there? Applications to join the station have tripled. People from 20 systems all asking if they can come here because they heard about what we did. They heard that somewhere, someone stood up. And how many of them will die when Vexithor comes back with a bigger fleet? Maybe all of them, Torvin said bluntly. Or maybe none. Maybe the Dominion decides Nowhere Station isn't worth the resources. Maybe they're too busy dealing with other stations, other worlds that got inspired by our example. You can't control all the consequences, Jack. You can only choose what you do right now. And right now, you chose to give people hope. That's not nothing. Jack wanted to believe that. He wanted to think that the deaths in the battle had meaning beyond just temporary victory. But late at night, when he closed his eyes, he saw the faces. The Chithra engineer, the Chromath warrior, the human family caught in crossfire. They died because of his choice. That weight didn't get lighter just because other people called him a hero. Lyra found him there an hour later, still staring at his half-rebuilt ship. She'd changed in the weeks since the battle. Her light patterns were more confident now, more assertive. She'd been working with the station's small medical team, and they'd discovered something fascinating. Her people's healing frequencies didn't just work on injuries. They could help with trauma, with psychological wounds. She'd been spending her days helping residents process what they'd experienced, using light and touch to soothe damaged minds. You're brooding again, she observed, settling beside him on a cargo crate. It's one of my talents, Jack said with a weak smile. You're thinking about the people who died, always. Lyra was quiet for a moment, her patterns shifting through colors Jack was learning to read. Blue-green for contemplation, amber for concern, finally a warm orange that meant determination. On my world, before the Dominion came, we had a saying, she said. The light that burns brightest casts the deepest shadows. It means that any action worth taking, any choice that matters creates darkness as well as illumination. The deaths in the battle are shadows, but the hope you've given to thousands, maybe millions, that's light. You can't have one without the other. That doesn't make the deaths hurt less. No, Lyra agreed. It shouldn't. The moment you stop feeling that pain is the moment you become like Vexithor, seeing people as numbers instead of lives. Your guilt is proof that you're still human, still capable of empathy. Don't discard it, but don't let it paralyze you either. She placed her crystalline hand over his scarred human one, and he felt the gentle warmth of her healing frequencies, not erasing the pain but making it bearable, reminding him that he wasn't alone in carrying the weight. The council wants to see us, she said after a while. Elena sent word. They've been meeting for days, trying to decide what Nowhere Station becomes next. The council, that's what they're calling themselves now. Representatives from each major section and species group. Elena's leading them, though she keeps insisting it's temporary. They want our input on something important. They made their way to the station's central conference room, a space that had once been a cargo bay, but now hosted a large circular table surrounded by seats, adapted for a dozen different body types. Elena was there, looking more tired than Jack had ever seen her, but with a fire in her eyes that suggested retirement was still far off. Around the table sat others. Torvin, a Chithra named Sulk, who'd taken over coordinating defenses, an elderly Vrexian called Honored Speaker Vex, several humans, and half a dozen representatives from species Jack couldn't name. Sit, Elena said, gesturing to empty seats. We've been debating Nowhere Station's future, and we keep coming back to the same question. What are we now? Are we still just a refuge, or have we become something else? We became a target. Sulk clicked, her insectoid features unreadable but her body language tense. The Dominion knows about us now, really knows about us. We'll never be left alone again. We were never left alone. Honored Speaker Vex countered, his scales dulled with age but his voice still strong. The Dominion has always exploited neutral stations. They just did it quietly through trade restrictions and administrative pressure. At least now we know where we stand. Where we stand is in danger, another representative said, a human man with military bearing. My intelligence contacts say Vex Thor is petitioning the Dominion High Command for a punitive fleet, not a single warship, but dozens. He wants to make an example of us that will echo for generations. The room erupted in concerned murmurs. Jack felt Lyra tense beside him. When? Elena asked quietly. Maybe 3 months, maybe 6. The Dominion doesn't move quickly when it comes to committing major resources, but they will move. Of that I'm certain. Then we prepare, Torvin said firmly. We upgrade defenses, we recruit fighters, we turn this station into a fortress. Or we evacuate, another voice suggested. Disperse to other stations before they come. Make ourselves not worth the resources they'd spend destroying us. And abandon everyone who can't leave? Elena challenged. The families with no ships? The elderly, the poor? We just sacrifice them to save ourselves? Better some survive than all die, the voice argued. Jack listened to the debate escalate, voices rising, fear and anger mixing into a toxic brew. These were good people trying to make impossible choices. Stay and possibly die defending a home, or flee, and definitely lose everything they'd built. Finally, he stood. The room gradually quieted, all eyes turning to him. I have a question, he said. What do you want Nowhere Station to be? Not what you think you should be, not what's practical or safe. What do you actually want? Eleanor answered immediately, as if she'd been waiting for someone to ask. A beacon, a place where people can come and know they won't be persecuted, exploited or enslaved, where the Dominion's laws don't reach and freedom isn't conditional on compliance. That's impossible, someone protested. One station can't stand against an empire. One station already did, Lyra said quietly. 3 weeks ago you all stood together. You made the Dominion back down. Was that impossible too? That was different. We were defending ourselves. You're talking about becoming an active resistance movement. No, Jack said. We're talking about being what we already are, free. The Dominion can't tolerate that. They can't allow proof that their power isn't absolute. So they'll come after us whether we hide or fight, whether we're quiet or loud. The only question is what we do about it. He took a breath, committing to words he knew would change everything. Lyra and I are leaving. Once the ship is ready, we're gone. Not because we're abandoning you, but because staying makes you a target. Vex Thor wants us. As long as we're here, he has justification to attack. But if we leave, if we take our story elsewhere, maybe he'll let you be. No. Eleanor's voice was sharp. Absolutely not. You think he'll leave us alone just because you're gone? Jack, we're all targets now. Everyone who stood in that hub, everyone who helped in the battle, everyone who chose defiance over compliance. We're all on the same list. The only difference is whether we face what's coming together or scattered. Then what do you propose? Jack asked, though he thought he already knew the answer. Helena looked around the table, meeting each representative's eyes. We become what the Dominion fears most. Not warriors, not conquerors, but a true alternative. A place that proves you can be free, that you can make your own choices, that you can defend yourself against empire. We become the example that inspires others. That will make us a target for every empire in the galaxy, Honored Speaker Vex pointed out. Not just the Dominion. The hegemony, the Federation, the corporate collective, none of them can afford to let us succeed. I know, Eleanor said, but I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of making my choices based on what empires allow. I want, just once before I die, to live in a place that's truly free, even if that freedom only lasts a few more months. The room fell silent. Jack could feel history pivoting on this moment, could sense that whatever was decided here would ripple out across the galaxy. One by one, the representatives began to speak, some arguing for caution, others for bold action, some wanting to flee, others ready to fight. But underneath all the debate, Jack heard something else, a yearning, a desperate need to believe that freedom was possible, that they could be more than just subjects and refugees. Finally, Elena called for a vote. Stay and build something worth defending, or disperse and hope to survive scattered. The vote was close, closer than Jack expected. But when the final count was tallied, the decision was made. Nowhere Station would stand, would become a beacon, would offer sanctuary to anyone fleeing empire, regardless of the cost. Then we need to prepare, Torvin said once the decision was made. Really prepare. Not just weapons, but infrastructure. We need to be self-sufficient. Food production, water reclamation, manufacturing. If empires blockade us, we need to survive without outside trade. We need allies too. Salk clicked. Other stations, other free ports. A network that can share resources and intelligence. We can't stand alone. And we need to spread the story, Lyra added. Make sure everyone knows what we're trying to do here. Make it public enough that destroying us becomes a public relations disaster for any empire that tries. Plans began forming, ideas bouncing around the table. Jack watched it happen with a mixture of pride and terror. These people, these ordinary beings who'd never asked to be revolutionaries, were organizing a resistance, creating something that could genuinely threaten the established order. And it had all started because he couldn't stand to watch someone be enslaved. The meeting eventually adjourned, representatives heading off to begin the massive work ahead. Eleanor lingered, approaching Jack and Lyra as the room emptied. "You two understand what you've started?" she asked quietly. "A movement," Jack said, "or a disaster." "Probably both." "Definitely both," Elena agreed with a tired smile. "But thank you for showing us we could, for being brave enough to care when it would have been easier to look away." She paused, then added, "You're still leaving though, aren't you, once the ship's ready?" Jack glanced at Lyra, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "We have to. Vexthor is personally hunting us. As long as we're moving, we're a difficult target. And maybe we can do some good out there. Find other stations, other groups that want to resist. Build the network Salk talked about." "Dangerous work," Elena observed. "Everything worth doing is," Lyra said. "My people learned that the hard way." Elena embraced them both, her weathered arms surprisingly strong. "Then go. Be the story that inspires others. But know you'll always have a home here. Nowhere Station will always be a safe harbor for you." "If it survives," Jack said. "It'll survive," Elena said with certainty, "because we've learned something from you. That survival isn't about hiding and hoping empires ignore you. It's about being worth surviving for. We're worth it now. This place, these people, the freedom we're building, that's worth defending." Later that night, Jack stood at a viewport in the station's outer ring, looking out at the stars. So much space out there. So many worlds under Imperial control. So many people living without choice, without hope, without knowing that alternatives existed. Lyra joined him, her light patterns reflecting off the viewport's surface. "Scared?" she asked. "Terrified," Jack admitted. "We're about to become the galaxy's most wanted fugitives. Every bounty hunter, every Imperial agent, everyone looking for a payday or advancement will be hunting us. We'll never be safe again." "We were never safe," Lyra countered. "I was kept in stasis. You were scraping by on the edges of Empire. Safety is an illusion the powerful sell to keep the powerless compliant. At least now we're unsafe while doing something that matters." Jack laughed despite himself. "When did you become so wise?" "Around the same time a cargo pilot became a revolutionary," Lyra said, her patterns showing humor. "We're both becoming things we never planned to be." "Do you regret it?" Jack asked. "Any of it?" Lyra moved closer, her crystalline hand finding his again. "Do you?" Jack thought about the arena, about the impossible jump, about the battle and the deaths, and the choice that had started everything, about Lyra standing beside him, free and alive, and choosing to stay despite every rational reason to run. "No," he said finally, "I don't regret it. I'm scared of what comes next, and I feel the weight of everyone we've put in danger, but I don't regret giving you a choice. I don't regret showing people they can stand up. Whatever happens now, at least we tried." "Then that's enough," Lyra said. "That's all anyone can do. Try, choose, act. The rest is just consequences, and consequences come whether we're brave or cowardly. Might as well earn them through courage." They stood together, watching the stars, two fugitives about to become something more. The ship was almost ready. The station was preparing for war. The galaxy was watching, waiting to see what happened next. In 3 days, they would leave Nowhere Station behind, would begin the work of building a network of resistance, of finding others who dreamed of freedom, of becoming the story that inspired change. But tonight, they had this moment, this quiet breath between one chapter of their lives ending and another beginning. "What do you think happens to us?" Jack asked quietly. "In the end?" Lyra's light patterns cycled through several colors before settling on a deep, rich purple that Jack had learned meant truth-telling. "I think we probably die, probably violently, probably soon. The odds are against us in every possible way." "That's cheerful," But, Lyra continued, I think we die having lived, having chosen, having mattered, and that's more than most beings in the galaxy can say, more than I ever expected after my world fell. So yes, Jack Morrison, we'll probably die, but before we do, we'll burn so bright that the galaxy can't look away. And maybe, just maybe, that light will be enough for others to see by. Jack squeezed her hand gently. For someone who spent years in stasis, you've got a pretty good handle on living. I had a good teacher, Lyra said, leaning her head against his shoulder. A cargo pilot who taught me that one person's choice can change everything. That courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about acting despite the fear. That freedom is worth any price. They stood together until the station's artificial night cycle deepened, until the stars seemed close enough to touch. Then they returned to Bay 17, to the ship that would carry them into an uncertain future, to the life they'd chosen over safety. The memories of tomorrow was almost ready to fly. Soon, very soon, they would leave this station behind and become wanderers, hunted across the galaxy but free in ways that mattered more than safety. And somewhere in the Dominion's heart worlds, Commander Vexithor was preparing his revenge, gathering forces and planning the destruction of everything they'd inspired. The real war was just beginning. But tonight, Jack and Lyra had each other, had hope, and had a ship that would fly them toward whatever came next. It would have to be enough. The memories of tomorrow launched from Nowhere Station on a grey morning, if morning could exist in the endless night of space. Half the station's population had gathered to see them off, crowding the observation decks and external docking bays. Jack had expected a quiet departure, maybe a few goodbyes from Torvin and Elena. Instead, he got a send-off that felt like something between a funeral and a celebration. Eleanor stood at the main airlock as they prepared to board, her weathered face showing every year of her age, but also a fierce pride that made her seem ageless. Remember, she said, pressing a data chip into Jack's hand, coordinates for every free port, neutral station, and resistance cell we know about. Most are rumors. Some are confirmed. All of them need to hear your story. All of them need to know they're not alone. We'll visit as many as we can, Jack promised. Build the network. Spread the word. And stay alive, Eleanor added firmly. You're not martyrs yet, and I'd prefer you never become them. The galaxy needs living heroes more than dead ones. Torvin lumbered forward, his massive form somehow managing to look almost gentle as he handed Lyra a small package. Medical supplies. The healing frequencies you've been using, I've encoded them into portable emitters. Won't be as effective as direct contact, but they'll help. Share them with others who need them. Lyra's light patterns flared with gratitude as she accepted the gift. You've given us so much, Torvin. I don't know how to repay— Survive, Torvin interrupted. That's payment enough. Every day you stay alive is another day the Dominion doesn't get what it wants. That's worth more than credits. The crowd began chanting as they walked toward their ship. Nothing organized, just a spontaneous expression of support that echoed through the docking bay. Different languages, different species, but the sentiment was universal. Hope, defiance, solidarity. Jack felt his throat tighten as he climbed the ramp. He'd come to this station expecting nothing but a quiet place to repair his ship. He was leaving as something he'd never wanted to be, a symbol. But looking back at the faces watching them depart, seeing the hope and determination there, he thought maybe being a symbol wasn't so bad, not if it meant people believed change was possible. The memories of tomorrow's engines roared to life, rebuilt and reinforced, but still carrying that distinctive rough sound that was uniquely hers. Jack guided the ship out of the bay with practiced ease, feeling the difference immediately. She handled better now, responded faster, had reserves of power she'd never possessed before. Torvin had turned his aging cargo hauler into something that could truly run, and they would need to run. The jump drive engaged, and Nowhere Station vanished behind them as they plunged into hyperspace, heading for the first coordinates on Elena's list. The station was called Refuge, and it orbited a dying red giant 6 days' travel from Nowhere. According to Elena's intel, it was smaller, quieter, and had managed to avoid Dominion attention by being too insignificant to bother with. Jack hoped they could keep it that way while still offering support. During the journey, they fell into a routine. Jack handled piloting and navigation, while Lyra studied the data chip, learning about the network of free ports and resistance cells scattered across the sector. At night, when the ship's artificial cycle dimmed the lights, they sat together in the tiny common area and talked about what they were building. It's more fragile than I expected, Lyra said one evening, her light patterns showing concern as she reviewed the intelligence. Most of these stations are barely surviving. One serious Dominion crackdown and they'd fold. That's why we're doing this, Jack said. To show them they're not alone, that if they stand together, they're stronger than they think. You really believe that? Jack was quiet for a moment, considering. I believe that people are stronger than they think. I believe that the Dominion relies on everyone feeling isolated and helpless, and I believe that even small acts of resistance matter. Beyond that, he shrugged. I'm making this up as I go. Lyra's laugh was like crystalline bells chiming. At least you're honest about it. Most revolutionaries pretend they have a master plan. Oh, I have a plan, Jack said with mock seriousness. Step 1, don't die. Step 2, help others not die. Step 3, make the Dominion regret ever putting a bounty on us. After that, it gets a bit fuzzy. They arrived at Refuge to find a station that made nowhere look prosperous by comparison. It was smaller, older, and held together with even more improvisation and desperation. The docking controller's voice was suspicious when they requested berth. State your business. We don't get many visitors out here, and the ones we get usually aren't friendly. We're here to talk, Jack said simply, to share a story and offer support. My name is Jack Morrison. This is Lyra. You might have heard about what happened at Nowhere Station. The silence stretched so long Jack thought they'd been rejected. Then, Bay 3, but we're watching you. Any trouble and you're spaced. We don't care who you are. Bay 3 was barely large enough for their ship, and when they emerged, they found a welcoming committee of sorts. 20 beings with various weapons all pointed at them. Leading them was a human woman who looked to be in her 40s, scarred and hard-eyed. So you're the ones who kicked Vexthor in the teeth, she said, studying them with professional assessment. I'm Captain Reeves. I run security here, such as it is. Before you say anything, understand that we've got 300 people on this station, most of them families, and exactly 0 defensive capabilities beyond the antique plasma cannons you probably saw on approach. We can't afford to be a target. We're not asking you to fight, Lyra said, stepping forward with her hands visible and empty. We're asking you to connect, to share resources and intelligence with other stations, to know that if the Dominion comes for you, you're not facing them alone. Pretty words, Reeves said, but the Dominion doesn't care about pretty words. They care about power, and we don't have any. Neither did Nowhere Station, Jack said. Neither did I when I crashed that arena. Power isn't just about weapons and warships. It's about people choosing to stand together. It's about making the cost of oppression higher than empires want to pay. Reeves's expression didn't soften, but something flickered in her eyes. Interest, maybe, or memory of a time when she'd believed things could change. Come on, she said, lowering her weapon. Station Council will want to hear this. No promises, but we'll listen. The next 3 hours were spent in a cramped conference room that smelled of recycled air and fear, telling their story to Refuge's leadership. Jack had told it before at Nowhere, but this time he focused on different details, the practical ones. How they'd trapped Dominion forces using knowledge of station layout, how they'd turned public attention into a weapon, how ordinary people with no military training had stood against professional soldiers and won through courage and creativity. The council members listened with the expressions of people who'd been beaten down too many times to easily believe in hope. But they listened. What you're describing is a network, one of them finally said, a Vrexian elder whose scales had gone pale with age. Stations communicating, sharing resources, warning each other about threats. That's never existed before. Free ports compete, they don't cooperate. Because we've been taught to see each other as rivals instead of allies, Lyra said. The empires want us isolated, competing for scraps, too focused on survival to organize. But what if we stopped playing that game? What if we realized that we're all fighting the same fight? It's a pretty dream, Reeves said, but dreams don't stop warships. No, Jack agreed, but they inspire the people who do. Every revolution starts with someone believing things can be different. We're not asking you to start a war. We're asking you to join a conversation, to be part of something bigger than just your station. The debate continued, arguments flowing back and forth. Some council members were intrigued, others dismissive, most simply scared of the consequences. Finally, Reeves raised her hand for silence. Here's what I propose, she said. We join this network. We share intelligence. We communicate with other stations. We support each other where we can. But we don't take stupid risks. We don't paint targets on our backs. We survive first, resist second. Fair? It wasn't everything Jack had hoped for, but it was more than he'd expected. Fair. That's all we're asking. Smart resistance, not suicidal defiance. They left refuge with coordinates for 3 more stations and a promise of regular communication. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The network was forming, link by cautious link. Over the next 2 months, they visited 14 more stations. Each one was different. Some were enthusiastic, embracing the idea of organized resistance immediately. Others were skeptical but willing to listen. A few refused entirely, too afraid or too comfortable with their current arrangements to risk change. But with each station, the network grew. Communication channels were established. Supply lines were planned. Intelligence about Dominion movements began flowing between stations. What had started as one pilot's impulsive rescue was becoming a genuine resistance movement, not without cost. 3 weeks after leaving refuge, they learned that a small station called Haven's End had been destroyed. Dominion forces had traced some communications back to them, labeled them as harboring fugitives, and made an example. 200 beings dead, vaporized from orbit as a warning to others. Jack took the news like a physical blow, retreating to his cabin and refusing to come out for hours. When Lyra finally entered, she found him sitting in the dark, staring at nothing. "They died because of us," he said, his voice empty. "Because we encouraged them to join the network. Because we gave them hope that got them killed." Lyra sat beside him, her light patterns dimmed to a soft, comforting blue. "They died because the Dominion is cruel and evil, not because you tried to help them, not because they chose to resist. The Dominion killed them, Jack, not you. I set them up as a target. You gave them a choice," Lyra corrected. "They could have stayed isolated, stayed quiet, and the Dominion might have destroyed them anyway. Or they might not have. But they chose to join something larger than themselves. They chose to be part of resistance. That was their decision, their courage. Don't take that away from them by making it about your guilt." Jack looked at her, seeing the fierce determination in her light patterns. "How are you so strong? You lost everything. Your world, your people, your freedom. But you never break down like this." "I break down all the time," Lyra said softly. "I just do it when you're sleeping, or when I'm alone in the engine room, or when I'm staring at the stars and remembering my world before the Dominion came. But then I remember why we're doing this. Not to win some impossible war, but to make sure that what happened to me, to my people, to all those beings at Haven's End, means something, that their suffering inspires change instead of just fading into forgotten history." She took his hand, her crystalline fingers warm against his skin. "You're human, Jack. You feel deeply. You care intensely, and that's your strength. But it's also your weakness. You take too much responsibility for things beyond your control. The Dominion killed those people. Our job is to make sure their deaths matter, to keep building this network until it's strong enough that stations like Haven's End can defend themselves." Jack squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her presence. "I don't know if I can do this. Be what people need me to be." "You don't have to be anything except yourself," Lyra said. "That's enough. It's always been enough." They emerged from hyperspace near their next destination to find something unexpected. Instead of 1 station, there were 3, close enough together that they'd formed an alliance. The largest was called Trinity Station, and it was broadcasting a message on all frequencies. "Jack Morrison and Lyra of the Veltran, if you're receiving this, you're invited to dock. We've been expecting you. We want to join your network, and we have information you need to hear." Jack and Lyra exchanged glances. It could be a trap. It could be Dominion forces using their reputation as bait, but they'd come this far by trusting people who wanted to resist. They couldn't stop now. Trinity Station was impressive, far larger and more organized than most free ports they'd visited. When they docked, they were met not by suspicious guards, but by a delegation of representatives from all 3 stations. Leading them was a Chromath female, her armor plates decorated with medals that suggested a military past. "I'm Commander Thara," she said, her voice carrying the weight of authority. "Former Dominion officer, discharged for refusing orders to bombard civilian populations. I heard about what you did at Nowhere Station, about what you're building. I want in. We all do." Over the next hours, they learned that Trinity wasn't just 3 stations cooperating. It was the beginning of something larger, a defensive alliance of free ports that had been forming independently of Jack and Lyra's efforts. They had ships, trained fighters, actual military organization, and they wanted to coordinate with the network. "We can't win a war against the Dominion," Thara explained, gesturing to tactical displays showing the sector. "But we can make conquest too expensive. We can make them think twice before attacking neutral stations. We can create a zone of space where freedom actually exists, defended by people willing to fight for it. That's exactly what we're trying to build, Lyra said, her light patterns brightening with excitement. A network of stations and groups that support each other, that make resistance possible. Then let's make it official, Thara said. Let's stop being scattered individuals and become a coalition, the Free Ports Alliance or whatever we want to call it. An actual organization with communication protocols, mutual defense agreements, shared resources, something that can stand against empire. Jack felt hope warring with caution in his chest. This was everything they'd been working toward, but it was also a massive escalation. Moving from informal network to actual alliance meant openly challenging imperial authority. It meant declaring that there was an alternative to submission. The Dominion will see this as rebellion, he said carefully. They'll come after us with everything they have. They're already coming, Thara said. I have contacts still in the military. Vex Thor has been granted his punitive fleet, 50 warships, enough firepower to level a dozen stations. He's targeting nowhere first, but he won't stop there. He means to make an example of every port that's joined your network, every station that's offered you sanctuary. Our choice isn't whether to face the Dominion's wrath. It's whether we face it alone or together. The room fell silent as the weight of that settled over them. 50 warships. Even with all the stations in the network, even with Trinity's military capabilities, they couldn't stand against that kind of force, unless they changed the nature of the fight. We can't win through military strength, Lyra said slowly, her analytical mind working through possibilities. But we don't have to. We need to make destroying us cost more than the Dominion is willing to pay, not in ships and soldiers, but in legitimacy and public support. How? Someone asked. By making sure the galaxy watches, Jack said, understanding dawning. By broadcasting everything. By making sure that when Vex Thor comes with his fleet, millions of beings across the galaxy see what the Dominion really is. Not the civilized empire they pretend to be, but the brutal tyranny underneath. We turn their own tactics against them. We make them destroy us in full view of the galaxy. And we make that destruction so horrific that it inspires more resistance than it crushes. That's asking people to die for propaganda, someone protested. No, Thara said firmly. It's asking people to fight for something worth dying for freedom, for the right to choose their own lives. And if we die in a way that ensures others continue the fight. That's not propaganda. That's strategy. The debate continued, but Jack could feel the momentum building. These people, these representatives of dozens of species from across the sector, were tired of being afraid, tired of submission, ready to stand for something, even knowing the cost. By the time the meeting adjourned, they'd made their decision. The Free Ports Alliance would form, would coordinate defenses, would prepare for Vex Thor's assault. And when it came, they would broadcast every moment to the galaxy. They would make their stand not just for survival, but for the principle that freedom could exist, that empires weren't inevitable, that ordinary people could choose defiance. As Jack and Lyra prepared to return to their ship, Thara approached them privately. You two need to understand something, she said quietly. You've become symbols, yes, but you're also targets. Vex Thor isn't just hunting you for what you did. He's hunting you because killing you becomes killing the movement. If he captures or kills you publicly, he deals a massive blow to everything we're building. We know, Jack said. That's why we keep moving, why we don't stay in one place too long. It's not enough, Thara said. You need protection. I'm assigning you an escort, 2 of my best pilots in fast ships. They'll shadow you, provide backup if you're intercepted. I'm not asking permission. The Alliance needs you alive. Jack wanted to argue, wanted to insist they could take care of themselves, but looking at Lyra, seeing the exhaustion in her light patterns from 2 months of constant travel and constant danger, he realized Thara was right. Thank you, he said simply. They launched from Trinity Station with their new escorts flanking them, 2 sleek fighters that had once served in various fleet forces before their pilots had deserted and found their way to free ports. It felt strange having protection, having others risking themselves to keep him and Lyra safe, but it also felt right, like they were no longer alone in this fight. The network was growing, the alliance was forming, and somewhere in the Dominion's heart worlds, Vex Thor's fleet was preparing to move. The real test was coming, not of weapons or ships, but of will, of whether freedom could be defended by ordinary people who'd decided they'd had enough of empire. Jack didn't know if they'd win. He didn't know if they'd even survive. But for the first time since crashing that arena, he felt like maybe Just maybe they had a chance. The warning came 3 months after the Freeports Alliance formally declared its existence. A simple message transmitted across every communication channel the network had established. Vex Thor's fleet has left Dominion space. Estimated arrival at Nowhere Station, 6 days. Jack received the message while docked at a small refueling station on the edge of the sector. His first instinct was to run, to put as much distance as possible between them and the coming storm. His second instinct, the one that surprised him, was to return, to stand with the people who'd stood for them. "We have to go back," Lyra said, not asking but stating fact. Her light patterns showed determination mixed with fear, a combination Jack had learned to recognize as her battle-ready state. Nowhere Station is where this started. If we're not there when Vex's Thor comes, what does that say about everything we've been building? It says we're smart enough to survive, Jack argued, though his heart wasn't in it. We can inspire people from anywhere. We don't have to be there to— Yes, we do, Lyra interrupted. Jack, this isn't about tactics or survival anymore. This is about showing everyone that we meant what we said. That freedom is worth fighting for even when the odds are impossible. If we run now, the entire network collapses. But if we stand, if we face Vex Thor knowing we'll probably die, that becomes the story that echoes for generations. Their escort pilots, a human named Sarah and a Vrexian called Kess, agreed. The whole galaxy's watching, Sarah said over the comm. Every news service, every independent broadcaster, everyone with a comm unit is going to be focused on Nowhere Station when that fleet arrives. Whatever happens there determines whether the Freeports Alliance becomes a real movement or just a failed rebellion that gets erased from history. Jack knew they were right. Knew it in the part of him that had crashed an arena to save a stranger, the part that couldn't watch injustice without acting. He'd started this by choosing courage over safety. He couldn't stop now. All right, he said, changing their course. We go back, but we go back smart. Torvin said he was working on something, some kind of defensive surprise. Let's hope he finished it. The journey back to Nowhere Station took 4 days at maximum burn, their escorts shadowing them the entire way. As they traveled, messages flooded in from across the network. Ships were coming, volunteers from dozens stations, bringing whatever weapons and defenses they could scrounge. It wouldn't be enough to stop 50 Dominion warships, but it would be enough to make the fight memorable. They arrived to find Nowhere Station transformed. Gone was the ramshackle appearance of improvised construction. The outer hull had been reinforced with armor plating from decommissioned ships. Weapons emplacements bristled from every available surface. And surrounding the station, arranged in defensive formations, were nearly 100 vessels of various sizes and capabilities. Not military ships, but cargo haulers like the Memories of Tomorrow, mining vessels, even pleasure craft, all retrofitted with whatever weapons their crews could install. The Freeports Alliance had come to make its stand. Elena Vasquez met them at the docking bay, looking older and more tired than when they'd left, but with fire still burning in her eyes. "Welcome home, you crazy fools. I was half hoping you'd be smart enough to stay away." "Only half," Jack said, embracing her. "The other half needed you here," Elena admitted. "The Alliance needs its symbols, and these people need to see that you're willing to die for what you believe in, not just ask others to die for it." "Cheerful thought," Jack muttered. "Accurate thought," Elena corrected. "Come on. Command center's been set up in the central hub. Torvin's there with the other coordinators. We've got 2 days before Vex Thor arrives and a lot of preparation left to do." The command center was chaos in the best possible way. Representatives from 24 stations, ship captains, engineers, and fighters, all working together to coordinate their impossible defense. Torvin stood at the center like a massive anchor, his 4 arms managing multiple displays simultaneously. "Jack, Lyra, about time," he rumbled. "We've got a plan. It's insane, it'll probably fail, but it's better than nothing." He pulled up a tactical display showing Nowhere Station and the surrounding space. "Vex Thor's bringing 50 warships. We can't fight them ship to ship. We'd be vaporized in minutes. So we're not going to try. Instead, we're going to turn the entire battlefield into a communications hub. Every ship, every station system, every piece of equipment we have is going to broadcast everything that happens here. Real-time, unedited, impossible to censor. The whole galaxy watches us fight and die if that's what happens." "And if Vex Thor just destroys us from orbit without engaging?" someone asked. "Then the galaxy watches the Dominion massacre civilians without provocation," Thara said, her presence commanding attention. She'd arrived from Trinity Station with a full squadron of actual combat-capable ships. Either way, we win the narrative. Either Vexthor backs down, proving the Dominion can be resisted, or he destroys us and proves the Dominion is the brutal tyranny we've been saying it is. Some victory, Jack said quietly, dying to prove a point. Every revolution requires martyrs, Thara said, not unkindly. The question is whether those deaths inspire change or just become statistics. We're making sure it's the former. The next 48 hours were a blur of preparation. Jack helped coordinate ship placements, ensuring maximum coverage for the broadcast networks. Lyra worked with medical teams, preparing emergency aid stations and distributing the healing frequency emitters Torvin had created. Throughout the station, people prepared in their own ways. Some were calm, almost serene in their acceptance of what was coming. Others were terrified, but determined. All of them were there by choice. Jack found himself in the observation deck the night before the fleet was due to arrive, staring out at the assembled ships. Each one represented people who'd decided that freedom was worth the risk, who'd chosen to stand with Nowhere Station, even knowing the cost. Second thoughts? Lyra asked, joining him at the viewport. Constant thoughts, Jack admitted. Wondering if I did the right thing. Wondering if all these people are about to die because I couldn't mind my own business in that arena. You're doing it again, Lyra said gently. Taking responsibility for other people's choices. Every being here chose to come, chose to fight. You didn't force anyone. You just showed them that choice was possible. And if we all die tomorrow? Lyra's light patterns shifted to that deep purple that meant absolute truth. Then we die free. Die having chosen our path. Die knowing we stood for something that mattered. That's more than most beings get, Jack. That's more than I ever expected after my world fell. She moved closer, and for the first time since the arena, since the impossible jump and the desperate flight, she leaned in and kissed him. Not the formal touching of heads that her people used for bonding, but a human kiss, learned and adapted, infused with all the emotion her light patterns couldn't quite express. I love you, she said when they parted, her crystalline features somehow managing to convey the vulnerability behind those words. I don't know if we'll survive tomorrow to say it again, so I'm saying it now. You gave me life, Jack Morrison. Real life, not just existence. Whatever happens next, that was worth everything. Jack felt tears on his face and didn't bother wiping them away. I love you too. I think I have since that moment in the arena, when you looked at me like I was offering the impossible, when you chose to run with me. They held each other as the station's artificial night deepened, as the assembled fleet held position around them, as the galaxy watched and waited to see what would happen when the Dominion's might met the resistance of ordinary people who'd decided they'd had enough. Dawn came, though in space dawn was arbitrary, marked only by the station's lighting cycle. But on this dawn, something else marked the transition from night to day, the arrival of 50 Dominion warships, dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their weapons arrays already charging, their hulls gleaming with the polished perfection of Imperial power. At the center of the formation, larger and more heavily armed than the rest, was Vexthor's flagship. As Jack watched from the command center, the commander's face appeared on every screen in the station, broadcast on all frequencies so that no one could avoid his message. Nowhere Station, Vexthor's voice carried absolute authority. You have harbored fugitives from Dominion justice. You have organized resistance against lawful Imperial authority. You have inspired rebellion across multiple systems. For these crimes, you have been sentenced to destruction. You have 1 hour to evacuate all personnel. After that, this station will be reduced to debris as a lesson to others who would defy the Dominion. Elena stepped forward, activating the station's response broadcast. Her voice, rough with age but steady with determination, answered the commander. Commander Vexthor, this is Elena Vasquez speaking for the Free Ports Alliance and the people of Nowhere Station. We reject your authority. We reject your laws. We reject your empire. This station is free territory, and we will defend it with our lives. The galaxy is watching, Commander. History is watching. Choose carefully what you do next. Vexthor's expression didn't change. Then you have chosen death. Fitting, I suppose. The Dominion's mercy extends only to those wise enough to accept it. The channel cut off. For a moment, nothing happened. The fleet held position, the station held position, and billions of beings across the galaxy watched, waiting to see which side would blink first. Then, with mechanical precision, the Dominion fleet began to advance. All ships, defensive positions, Thara's voice rang out across the command network. Remember the plan. We're not trying to win. We're trying to survive long enough to make them look like the monsters they are. The battle, when it began, was nothing like the orderly conflicts Jack had seen in military records. The Freeport's ships didn't engage in formation or follow tactical doctrine. They swarmed, using their numbers and maneuverability to create chaos, forcing the Dominion ships to fire into clusters, where hitting one target meant risking damage to their own forces. The Memories of Tomorrow launched with Sarah and Kes flanking her, diving into the maelstrom of weapons fire and explosions. Jack flew with every bit of skill he'd developed over 15 years of piloting, dodging plasma bolts that would have vaporized them, using debris fields as cover, making his ship dance through space in ways that shouldn't have been possible. "They're targeting the broadcasting equipment," someone shouted over the command network, "trying to shut down the feeds." "Backup systems online," Torvin responded. "Every ship is broadcasting independently. They'd have to destroy us all to stop the signal." And people were dying. Jack saw a cargo hauler take a direct hit, saw it explode in a flash of light that represented dozens of lives ended in an instant. Saw a mining vessel ram a Dominion warship in a desperate suicide attack, crippling it but sacrificing everyone aboard. Saw ships fleeing, damaged beyond repair, their crews choosing survival over martyrdom, and he didn't blame them one bit. The station itself was under assault, weapons fire hammering its shields, but those shields were holding. Torvin's reinforcements were working, buying them time, keeping the station intact, even as the battle raged around it. "Jack, incoming on your 6. Sarah's voice crackled over the comm. He banked hard, feeling the ship groan under the stress, but not fast enough. A plasma bolt clipped their starboard engine, and alarms screamed through the cabin. They were hit, systems failing but still flying. "I've got you," Kes called, her Vrexian fighter putting itself between them and the pursuing Dominion vessel, trading fire with a ship 5 times her size. Through it all, Lyra sat in the co-pilot's seat, her light patterns blazing with such intensity that they could probably be seen from outside the ship. She wasn't just afraid or determined anymore. She was transcendent, channeling something primal from her people's extinct culture. A warlight, ancient and terrible and beautiful. "Jack," she said, her voice strange, layered with harmonics he'd never heard before. "The station. We need to get back to the station. I can feel it. Something's happening." He didn't question her. Couldn't question her, not when she looked like this. Like every Velthran who'd ever fought for freedom was speaking through her. He turned the ship, limping back toward Nowhere Station on one engine and prayers. They docked in Bay 17, their original bay, now scorched and damaged but still functional. Racing through corridors where emergency lights flashed and damage control teams worked frantically, they reached the central hub to find something impossible. The station's population had gathered, not in shelters, not in safe zones, but here, in the most vulnerable spot, thousands of beings, every species represented, standing together in the face of certain death. And at the center, Elena held a simple light, a maintenance torch, its beam shining upward through the hub's transparent dome, toward the battle raging above. "What are they doing?" Jack gasped. "Bearing witness," Lyra said, and her light patterns synchronized with that torch beam, amplifying it, making it shine brighter. "My people believed that light was truth, that seeing something made it real in a way that could never be undone. They're making sure that whatever happens here, it's seen, it's real, it's witnessed." One by one others joined, humans with portable lights, bioluminescent species adding their natural glow, anyone with anything that could produce light, holding it high, creating a beacon that shone through the dome and out into space. And on a million worlds, billions of beings watched that light, watched those people standing together, defying death, refusing to hide or flee. Watched the Dominion fleet continue its assault on a station that was doing nothing but bearing witness. On the bridge of his flagship, Commander Vex's Thor saw it too. Saw the light, saw the broadcasts, saw the galaxy watching him destroy beings whose only crime was refusing to submit. "Sir," one of his officers said carefully, "the High Command is requesting communication. They're receiving reports that support for the Dominion is collapsing in several systems. The broadcasts from the battle are causing complications." Vex Thor's scales darkened with fury. "I don't care about complications. I was ordered to make an example of this station, that's what I'll do." But his hand hesitated over the firing control. Because for the first time in his military career, Commander Vexithor was facing something his training hadn't prepared him for, the realization that victory through destruction might cost more than defeat. If he destroyed Nowhere Station now with the galaxy watching, with those beings standing in their hub holding lights like a vigil, he wouldn't be crushing a rebellion. He'd be creating martyrs that would inspire 100 more rebellions. But if he didn't destroy them, if he backed down a second time, he'd prove that the Dominion could be defied. That fear wasn't enough to maintain control. Either way, he'd lost. "Cease fire," he ordered, his voice hollow with the recognition of defeat. "All ships, cease fire and withdraw." The command network erupted with confused voices. "Sir, we have them. We can end this." "I said cease fire," Vex Thor roared. "Destroying them now accomplishes nothing but making them heroes. We withdraw, regroup, and find another way." The Dominion fleet began pulling back, weapons powering down, ships turning away from Nowhere Station. The Freeport's vessels held position, not pursuing, not celebrating, just watching the enemy leave. In the central hub, the gathered crowd held their lights high until the last Dominion ship jumped to hyperspace. Then, slowly, the lights lowered, and a sound rose up that started as a whisper and built to a roar. The sound of people who'd faced death and survived, who'd stood against Empire and won not through violence but through witness. Jack found himself caught in the celebration, bodies pressing around him, beings of every species embracing, crying, laughing, alive against all odds. He spotted Elena in the crowd, tears streaming down her weathered face as she hugged anyone within reach. "We did it," she said when she reached Jack and Lyra. "We actually did it. We stood, and they blinked." "They'll come back," Jack said, but even he could hear the lack of conviction in his voice. "Let them," Elena said fiercely. "Let them come 100 times. We'll stand 100 times, because now everyone knows it's possible. Now every station, every world, every being living under Empire knows that resistance isn't futile, that ordinary people can say no and make it stick." Lyra's light patterns were cycling through every color Jack had ever seen her display, emotion too complex for any single shade. She pulled him close and he could feel her crying, crystalline tears that caught the light and scattered it like prisms. "We're alive," she whispered. "We stood at the edge of extinction, and we're still alive." Over the following weeks, the broadcasts from the Battle of Nowhere Station spread across the galaxy. The images of ordinary people standing with lights, refusing to flee or hide, facing down imperial power with nothing but courage and witness, became the defining symbol of resistance. The Free Ports Alliance, instead of being crushed, grew exponentially as stations and systems that had never considered defiance suddenly saw it as possible. Commander Vex Thor was recalled to face an inquiry about why he'd failed to destroy a station he'd been ordered to eliminate. His explanations about strategic withdrawal and avoiding propaganda victories fell on deaf ears. The Dominion High Command understood what had happened. Their enforcer had been broken, not by superior force, but by the realization that some victories cost more than defeat. The galaxy didn't change overnight. The empires didn't collapse. But something fundamental shifted. The story of a cargo pilot who crashed an arena to save a stranger, and the network of resistance that grew from that single act of compassion proved that ordinary people could defy extraordinary power and survive. 6 months later, Jack and Lyra stood in the observation deck of Nowhere Station, now officially the capital of the Free Ports Alliance. The station had been repaired and expanded, becoming a true beacon of freedom in a galaxy still largely controlled by empires. "We should go," Jack said, though his voice carried no real urgency. "There are other stations that need help, other systems where people want to organize." "We should," Lyra agreed, her light patterns showing contentment. "But not today. Today we rest. Today we remember why we fought." "And why was that?" Lyra gestured to the viewport where ships of 100 different designs moved freely, where beings lived and worked and chose their own paths without fear of imperial control. Because freedom, real freedom, is worth any price. Because one person's choice to help a stranger can change everything. Jack took her hand, human warmth meeting crystalline light. Two beings who should never have met but had become something more than either could have been alone. "Do you think it'll last?" he asked. "The alliance, the resistance, all of it?" "I think it's already lasted longer than anyone thought possible," Lyra said. "And every day it continues is another day someone lives free who wouldn't have otherwise. That's enough. That's always enough." They stood together, watching the ships move through space, watching the galaxy turn, knowing that threats would come again, that the fight would never truly end, but also knowing that they'd proven something fundamental, that empires could be resisted, that freedom could be defended, and that sometimes the most powerful weapon wasn't violence, but the simple choice to stand for something worth standing for. In the central hub below, Elena was organizing another council meeting, representatives from 30 systems now, all working together to build something new. Children played in corridors where beings from different worlds lived side by side. Engineers designed better defenses. Healers treated the wounded who'd come from battles across the sector. Life continued. Complicated, messy, beautiful life lived on terms chosen by the people living it rather than imposed by distant emperors. And somewhere in the vast galaxy, on 1,000 different worlds, in the shadows of empire and in the light of resistance, others watched and learned and gathered courage from the story of a cargo pilot and a Velthran survivor who'd proven that freedom was possible, that one person could make a difference, that hope was stronger than fear, that love could defeat tyranny. The story wasn't over. Stories like this never were. But this chapter had ended well, with Jack and Lyra alive and together, with Nowhere Station standing proud, with the Free Ports Alliance growing stronger every day, and that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.